Chapter 1181. In order to work better and to have a better breakout, I'm carefully applying for a few days of leave. Leaders, please give your instructions. It's scheduled to start tomorrow. Brackets, 29th of the 12th month to the 7th day of the 1st month. I'm applying for 8 days of leave. On the account that I've been diligent and hardworking for more than a year and that I'm especially handsome, please sign your permission. That's all. Thank you very much. I'm the Supreme Being applies for leave from the leaders for the Chinese New Year. Currently typing, please wait a moment. After the content is updated, please refresh the page to get the latest update. Chapter 1182. This year's Lunar New Year was very boring. No one was setting off firecrackers anymore. Moreover, I applied for 8 days of leave but I was stuck in a bottle for 4 days, can you believe it? I'm still wearing a thick cotton cap, can you believe it? I wasn't sick when I didn't apply for leave, but after I applied for leave my head froze and then I got a migraine. This is really, I wanted to have a big drink this Lunar New Year. But because of this, I didn't even get to drink red wine. Can you believe it? I didn't drink a drop of wine this Lunar New Year. Other people gained 10 pounds during the Lunar New Year, but I lost 6 pounds during the Lunar New Year. Other people drink and brag at night, but I wear the electric headgear that my wife borrowed for perming to prevent my head from sweating. Sigh, I won't act pitiful anymore. In short, I'm not happy. I'll update at night, I'll write. I am the Supreme, I'm back. Currently typing, please wait for a moment. After the content is updated, please refresh the page to get the latest update. Chapter 1183. Pardon my rudeness. I didn't expect Lady Bai to be an important figure of the Nine Lives Cat Demon clan. Yin Yang smiled. Why do you say that? Bai Bingxian denied it hurriedly. I'm only a junior demon with a shallow cultivation base who was lucky enough to escape. Yun Yang chuckled again and said leisurely, throughout the entire escape process, many seniors with a higher cultivation base than you have died, but you, a little demon with a shallow cultivation base, have remained safe and sound the entire time. As for the subordinates who stayed by your side, their attitude towards you was more like blind loyalty than admiration. Wouldn't I be an idiot if I couldn't see this? Bai Bingxian shook her head with a pained expression. Leader Yun's eyes are sharp, of course you're right. But what about our past identities? It's all in the past. Now we're just a bunch of cat demons who depend on each other. That's all, there's no difference between us. Yun Yang nodded and did not linger on the topic. Lady Bai, you said that since the cat ancestor didn't perish but was only suppressed, it means that there's still a chance for him to come out again. Then why are the other demons so ruthless and merciless? Aren't they afraid of his revenge in the future? Other than His Majesty the demonic sovereign's limitless imprisonment, the Lord Cat ancestor is also suppressed in the demon lake. Bai Bingxian said, ever since the demonic sovereign's domain was established, none of the demonic seniors who were suppressed in the demon lake have ever come out alive. It's also because of this common understanding that the various clans made their choice. Yin Yang sighed. So that was why the cat ancestor had basically been executed? Yun Yang could not help but recall Feng Guohai's introduction to the Nine Lives Cat back then. When the Nine Lives Cat and Hall Master Huo fought, everything within 10,000 miles was destroyed, none of the mountains and rivers were spared. How peerless was that? How glorious was that? Combined with the cat ancestor's life-saving ability that he had personally experienced today, it was truly remarkable. If the cat ancestor were to perform this skill himself, who knew how far he could go? The so-called immortality of the physical body was definitely not a lie. But such a figure had failed and was suppressed at the bottom of the demon life lake, causing his clan to lose power just like that. Practically all of his clansmen were slaughtered, causing him to be in an extremely miserable state. When the two were compared, it truly caused others to be unable to help but sigh. Thinking of this, Yun Yang looked at Bai Bingxian again. His gaze was even more meaningful. This girl's identity must be extraordinary. No wonder she was sent here for a mission. She is obviously here to seduce her. She should greet her with her body, but she still ignored Lei Dongtian. However, since Bai Bingxian was unwilling to talk about it, Yun Yang did not probe further. Since all of you are, then why? Yun Yang looked at Bai Bingxian. The reason why we were able to escape and come back from death was because of someone's help. And it was this person who, after saving us, used a method to control us. Little did they know that after we escaped, we had nowhere to go at all. We already had the heart to attach ourselves to the strong, but it was just the difference between one being active and the other being passive. Yun Yang asked, who is that person? Yun Yang was not the least bit interested in how this person had controlled them. It was rare for people to be kind or malicious to each other, so the person's motive was not Yin Yang's concern. Yin Yang only wanted to know this person's true identity. We have no idea about this person's true identity, background, and origin. The only thing we can be sure of is that he is a demon. Also, his ability should have reached the level of a royal saint. He is the pinnacle of the demon race and the world's top expert. Bai Bingxian answered quickly. Demon race. Yin Yang was stunned by the answer. This answer was completely different from the direction he had guessed. It was the complete opposite of what he had guessed. All the evidence and the direction of the incident clearly pointed to the Lei family's old ancestor, the Sacred Heart Palace's great elder Lei Qinli. But why was there such a sudden turn? The person behind all of this was actually a demon clan. You said that the only thing you can be sure of is that your master is a demon, and an extremely powerful one at that. Yun Yang's eyes flashed as he asked for the first time. Yes, we, the demon race, have an instinctive way of detecting our own kind. Actually, it's not really a way to distinguish. We can tell with just a glance. There's no need to identify demonic aura like you humans do or to fight. We only need a glance. That person is a demon. Do you know his name? I don't know. Then what did he use to control you? Is it a secret skill unique to the demon race? Yes, he used a trace of his demonic soul to form a bond. Since his ability is far above all the current members of the Cat clan, he can die with just a thought. There's no way to fight back. How long have you been controlled by him until now? Our branch escaped with the help of his ability, but we fell into his hands immediately. It's been 13 years. 13 years? The Cat ancestor was also suppressed 13 years ago? How is that possible? The Cat ancestor was suppressed by the Demon Emperor hundreds of years ago, and our 9 Lives Cat clan is one of the top 5 clans in the Demon Emperor's domain. Previously, our higher-ups were still there and we could still hide from each other and support each other. Although we were struggling at death's door, we still managed to survive. It wasn't until more than 10 years ago that we were finally weakened to the point where we couldn't even hide anymore. We had no choice but to go to extremes and flee the demon realm. From what you think, did the demon controlling you suddenly decide to control you, or was it premeditated? I think you've thought about it before, haven't you? Bai Bingxian furrowed her brows and carefully thought for a while. Then she cautiously replied, Of course I've thought about this. Based on my personal judgment, the other party doesn't seem to have come up with this idea on the spur of the moment. But if it's premeditated, it doesn't seem like it. If it's premeditated, what's the use of controlling just the 8 of us? Yin Yang nodded. That's true. Then what have you done for him all these years? I'm afraid there must be a lot of them. A lot of them indeed. Bai Bingxian had no intention of hiding this part, recounting them one by one. Yun Yang listened attentively, occasionally asking for details. Listening to Bai Bingxian's narration of the past, Yun Yang realized that the things his lord wanted Bai Bingxian and her clansmen to do were not dangerous at all. In the beginning it was not dangerous at all. It was mostly used to train the team and train their teamwork. In the middle of it, sneaking into the Demon Emperor's domain to steal something or other heaven and earth treasure was much riskier, but from Yun Yang's perspective, it was more of a test. In spite of this, Bai Bingxian unintentionally mentioned a topic that moved Yin Yang. Every full moon night, his lord would ask Bai Bingxian to cultivate the Cat ancestor's unique cultivation method under the moonlight and pray to the Cat ancestor about the current situation of the Cat clan. What did this mean? Chapter 1184. Yun Yang pondered with a frown. Other than that, the most noteworthy thing was that there had been 2 incidents similar to the Lei family's annihilation. Bai Bingxian and the others were responsible for completing the related missions. Of course, their main task was to choose a specific descendant from the family to spare his life and hand him over to the mysterious person. After that, they had nothing to do with it. However, they had then coincidentally found out that the 2 families they were responsible for monitoring had been completely annihilated. At the same time, it was only now that Bai Bingxian knew that the root of all the planning was for the meridian-severing blood bead. Since he understood the crux of the matter, he would probably kill the remaining bloodline of his family at the last moment and use his true essence to facilitate or awaken the final form of the meridian-severing blood bead. Then he would sacrifice the blood bead to obtain the complete power. Then, do you know the true form of the great demon who controls all of you? Yin Yang asked. We've never seen his true form. He's always dressed in a black robe and we can't see his face. However, he should be very tall and strong. Bai Bingxian said hesitantly. There's no need to talk about this. Since he has the pinnacle of the demon clan's ability, it's only a matter of time before he changes his body. It's not enough to be relied on. Yun Yang interrupted, have you seen him fight? What kind of weapon does he use? We've only seen him use a sword. A sword he picked up casually. Other than using the mystical crystal for communication, does he have any other way of contacting all of you? Most of the time he communicates with the mystical crystal. After all, the missions we've carried out all these years have been spent monitoring the target. He'll occasionally come to Lingxiu Valley where we stay. Does he have any special signs? For example, is there someone else behind this great demon? Or perhaps, he's in cahoots with someone else? Or perhaps, he's in contact with the demon emperor's domain? Yun Yang racked his brain to ask every question he could think of. Information was often found in these inconspicuous details. I can feel that he has a very strong purpose in his actions, and his actions are unusually meticulous. He plans before he acts. Basically, he has to think about everything for a long time before he moves on to the next step. His cautiousness has truly reached an astonishing level. As long as he doesn't have to show himself, he definitely won't show himself. There's one more thing. Even though we've only killed 3 sects including the Lei family, we're not the only team under him. That's because I've searched for cases of the human race being wiped out during my free time and discovered that there were many similar cases. It's just that there are many humans in the Shenhuang world, and third-rate aristocratic families like the Lei family are as numerous as the hairs on a cow. It's not uncommon for an entire family to be wiped out overnight by their enemies. If not for the fact that we've made up our minds, it would have been difficult to discover more. Of course, this is just my personal opinion, and I don't have any concrete evidence. After all, his other manpower has never been displayed before us. Listening to Bai Bingshuan's words, Yun Yang felt a growing headache. According to what he said, this person would be very difficult to find. Yun Yang's original plan was almost useless now. Yun Yang's series of tactics were all aimed at the Lei family's great elder, Lei Qianli. Now, however, it was obvious that he was lacking. According to his original plan, he could not use a single one of them. Instead, it was the mystical Yin pearl that he had thought of on the spur of the moment that might yield some results. Is there anything else you want to know? Bai Bingshen was more proactive now. From Yun Yang, she had discovered a way for her to break free from his control. However, the information she had provided was too weak and did not match the benefits that Yun Yang had offered. Naturally, she hoped that he could provide more assistance to increase the leverage that she could use. What I want to know. Yun Yang's mind flashed as he said, the people behind you should know about the Lei family reuniting with their ancestors, right? The Lei family only cultivated the evil cultivation method that's suitable for the Meridian Severance blood pearl after reuniting with their ancestors. And that lord of yours sent you here at this time. Yun Yang said faintly, so no matter what, at least on the surface, it's related to the Lei family's old ancestor. Indeed, Yun Yang's deduction was not wrong based on this layer of cause and effect. It was completely reasonable. Of course I know this, but the person who gave the cultivation method back then might not be an imposter. Bai Bingshen said calmly, with his skill, if he wanted to impersonate the Lei family's old ancestor to set up this trap, it's impossible for the Lei family's people to tell. So, yes or no, what the truth is, it all depends on what we do and how we do it. With Bai Bingshuan's reminder, Yun Yang, who had thought through this crucial point, felt refreshed and inspired. Bai Bingshen, for the time being, we're making a deal. I'll use a trick in exchange for your information, and you won't have to die because of it. You might even be put in an important position. However, I think we can work together on a deeper level. After all, the differences between humans and demons are no longer so absolute to you, Yun Yang said with a smile. Bai Bingshen broke into a smile, like a blossoming flower at the dawn of spring. I feel the same. Maintaining a close working relationship with sect leader Yun may be the key to the Cat clan's survival. Then use your freedom to exchange for space for our cooperation. Yun Yang said softly, this is my bargaining chip. Bai Bingshen pressed her lips together and said, I'll cooperate fully with you. Yun Yang chortled. Then I wish us a happy cooperation and mutual benefit. Watching Yun Yang leave, Bai Bingshuan's expression turned grim again. Princess, can this Yun Yang be trusted? Behind her, a slightly scrawny cat demon asked softly. Bai Bingshuan's gaze was blank as she murmured, it doesn't matter whether he's trustworthy or not now. We've long given up on anyone. Ever since that day. Haven't we realized our current situation? We're only someone else's slaves now. Whether we can survive this ordeal is still uncertain. What right do we have to choose whether someone else is trustworthy or not? We can only take a gamble. Bai Bingshen gripped the jade box in her hand tightly as if she was holding on to her life. Let's go. The mystical Een Pearl, this is a big enough bet. Let's see if you'll take the bait. Yun Yang returned to the Lei family residence in stealth mode and made some arrangements. Chapter 1185. Bai Bingxian had already sent the message. The Lei family has been annihilated. Yun Yang is confirmed to have escaped without a trace. According to my lord, we dug 99 feet deep but found something strange. This subordinate can't see it clearly, so it's hard for me to make a decision. Please make a decision, my lord. After the message was sent out, a lazy voice came from the other end after a while. What is it? When this subordinate obtained this item, I was almost taken advantage of by it. It took me a lot of effort to put it away. That item has the ability to transform. I guess it's very similar to the legendary Nightmare Soul. Bai Bingxian said with uncertainty. Hearing Bai Bingxuan's words, the other side of the message crystal immediately flashed with unprecedented urgency. The person's voice came one after another as if there was no end to it. Nightmare Soul? Are you sure? The ability to transform? What did it transform? How many illusions did it form? To what extent? Your ability is mediocre, but it took you a lot of effort to capture it? Could this Nightmare Soul already be able to pursue souls? No, if it could, how could you capture it with your ability? After 3 sentences he calmed down. Stay where you are. Don't move. Don't make any reckless moves. Then there was no sound. After Bai Bingxian and the others left, Yun Yang stayed for a while at the Lei family's old residence before shooting off in a direction far away. Then, he returned to the old residence and made some arrangements before leaving, satisfied. I still need to add something over there. After some thought he went to the faraway mountain again. He made 3 trips back and forth. Nightmare Soul? Everything that should be there, something that people suspect is there. It's just that. Yun Yang left with an inexplicable chuckle. This setup should be enough to keep the human or demon in the dark interested for a long time. On the second day of Yun Yang's departure, Bai Bingxian and the others came to the side of the dug hole as Yun Yang had instructed, waiting quietly. Yun Yang was straightforward. Bai Bingxuan's master had been longing for the mystical Een Pearl and would definitely arrive the next day. He had to wait early to ensure that there was no mistake. Suddenly, a gust of wind blew in the sky and a black shadow covered the sun. In an instant, the Lei family's old residence became gloomy, as if it was no longer in the mortal world. Bai Bingxian and the others didn't dare to move recklessly. A black figure suddenly appeared in the sky. The newcomer was wearing a large black robe that covered his body and face. As the wind blew, the black robe fluttered in the air. It was as if the person was weightless, as if only the black robe was fluttering in the air. Was it discovered here? A sinister voice came from within the black robe, but it caused everyone to shiver and feel a chill run down their spines. Yes, Bai Bingxian replied respectfully with her head lowered. Why aren't you showing me? Bai Bingxian dared not delay as she presented the box that Yun Yang had passed to her with both hands. With a wave of the black-robed man's hand, the box flew up from Bai Bingxuan's hand and slowly flew hundreds of feet before landing in his hand. It was also at this moment of contact that the black-robed man felt the strange wave that came from the box. It was an extremely sinister chill that was filled with an endless desire to devour. The black-robed man was delighted. He sensed it carefully again and realized that the item in the box was filled with an indescribable vitality other than an otherworldly chill. It was as if it could endlessly rush left and right in the jade box, trying its best to break free. Such vitality and spirituality were all pointing in the direction that the black-robed man hoped for the most. The black-robed man actually trembled slightly in the air, his eyes glinting. The demonic chi that enveloped him spread and the ghostly aura around him intensified. It's a nightmare soul indeed. It's really a nightmare soul. He turned his head abruptly, his gaze focused on the place where the Lei family's residence used to be but was now a bottomless pit. He sucked in a deep breath. I didn't expect a nightmare soul to appear here. Could it be that the heavens are blessing me and helping me achieve my dream? But why would a spiritual item like a nightmare soul appear here? I used the art of crimson to lead the way, the Lei family's flesh and blood as a guide, and the soul as a mark. The expected reward was only the meridian-severing blood bead. Why would a nightmare soul appear? This shouldn't be the effect of the crimson meridian-severing formation. It should be, the person in the black shadow muttered to himself, his eyes looking in all directions constantly scanning. This area is actually an extremely rare and well-hidden gathering place of ghosts. However, this has been the Lei family's old residence for generations. Although the Lei family's talents are mediocre, they are a thriving family with an extraordinary foundation and luck. How can it be a gathering place of spirits under their old residence? Looking at the extremely obvious terrain of the three sons, the black-robed person frowned. After thinking for a while, he couldn't figure it out no matter what. At this moment there was another movement underground. The black-robed person's eyebrows twitched. His entire body shot into the pit like lightning. As he raised his hands, the entire layer of soil flew up. His efficiency was more than 100 times that of Bai Bingxian and the others. However, even though he acted extremely fast, he was still a step too late. He only had time to see a gray stream of air flash eerily before disappearing into the ground without a trace. Only an eerie feeling spread out from underground. Although it was only a flash, it lingered for a long time and was not fake. The black-robed person's figure flashed and shot into the sky. In an instant he had already rushed thousands of feet into the sky. He also released all the power of his divine sense. Immediately, he focused his gaze on the distant mountain range that was beyond his sight. The eerie power was fleeing in that direction. It's actually another nightmare soul. How can this be? The black-robed person stood in midair, a little dazed for a moment. Was the crimson chi here so thick? He thought hard. The nightmare soul has actually appeared here again. This place, could it be? Yes, it must be so. The black-robed person's eyes suddenly lit up when he thought of this. He seemed to have figured something out. Although this is the Lei family's old residence and the place where the luck of the family gathers, it is also the place where the Lei family's male bloodline has been wiped out. The accumulated fortune of the Lei family over the generations has instead fueled the resentment within the Lei family. Especially these few days when the Lei family has been completely annihilated, the resentment is at its peak, and the nightmare soul can only grow by gathering the purest negative energy. Chapter 1186. Therefore, other than the incomplete meridian severance blood bead, the real reason for the nightmare soul's arrival is also because of the resentment from the Lei family's men's deaths over the past few days. It's reasonable that the energy that should have formed the meridian severance blood bead has been sucked dry. Although the resentment gathered by the Lei family is heavy, it's only temporary. What's more, the meridian severance blood bead's power is more in line with the nightmare soul's intentions, allowing Bai Bingxian to take it by accident. How lucky! Now that the nightmare soul has come and left, it might not be because of me but because it's being transported. Although the nightmare soul's attribute is unique, its power is relatively limited. It's obvious that Bai Bingxian could capture it. There must be more than one nightmare soul that has come to absorb the meridian severance blood bead's power. Does this mean that there's a mystical Een Pearl in this area, and it's in the process of forming? Muttering the words mystical Een Pearl, the black-robed man's silhouette that was hidden in the black robe actually trembled in excitement. It was obvious that he could not control his emotions. The mystical Een Pearl, the black-robed man's gaze was filled with unconcealable greed and longing. The Tao of Yang, the Tao of Yin. Both paths of Yin and Yang can lead straight to the end. Then he landed in a flash. Looking at Bai Bingxian, a new doubt rose in his heart. That's not right. A single nightmare soul's combat power isn't strong, but it's extremely fast. Even if I wanted to capture it, I probably wouldn't be able to catch up, much less capture it. With Bai Bingxian's ability, how could she capture it? Thinking about this, he blurted out, "How did you capture this thing then?" Following Yun Yang's instruction, Bai Bingxian answered in a trembling voice, "After this subordinate dug out the destination according to Master's method, I didn't see the blood bead that you've mentioned. There was only a thick blood fog around this thing that was squirming. The moment we met, it pounced towards this subordinate. Everything happened too quickly. In a moment of desperation, this subordinate stretched out my hand. I caught it with just a stretch of my hand. There wasn't anything out of the ordinary. This subordinate was very surprised then. He grabbed it with just a stretch of his hand? When the black-robed man heard this, a strange light flashed in his eyes. He stared at Bai Bingxian without blinking. He extended his hand and grabbed Bai Bingxian's wrist. A stream of qi instantly entered Bai Bingxian's meridians. After quickly wandering around, he suddenly realized something and said, "Your 9 Lives Demon Cat clan actually had such a special talent. You can restrain cold and gloomy things? No, this still doesn't make sense, eh?" At this point he suddenly stopped talking. This was because he had discovered a wisp of faintly discernible cold energy in the depths of Bai Bingxian's dantian. This kind of coldness was almost imperceptible, but it was real. It was a kind of special coldness that should not belong to a living person. That's it. His eyes flashed. He finally understood everything. So that was how it was. So there was an expert who had placed a death restriction on Bai Bingxian. That was why the nightmare soul rushed towards her. It was because of that extremely pure death chi. Just like how the Lei clan's male descendants were all killed, causing the unformed meridian termination blood bead's resentment energy to increase greatly. Because of this, the nightmare soul came here and didn't see the resentment energy. Instead, it absorbed the blood bead's foundation. Later on, when it sensed the even purer death chi on Bai Bingxuan's body, it instinctively threw itself into her arms and was naturally captured. I understand, I completely understand. When he thought of this, the black-robed man's heart was completely dispelled. He looked at Bai Bingxian as if he was looking at a peerless treasure. F***ck, if I knew you didn't have long to live before today, I wouldn't have come looking for you. But after today it's completely different. Even though you still can't escape death, you can help me find the nightmare soul before you step into the Yellow Springs. As long as I find the nightmare soul, it means that I can find the profound Yin underworld bead. It means that I have a bright future ahead of me. This was simply a rare short-lived ghost that was hard to come by in this world. How can I not cherish such a precious short-lived ghost? If I die before I find the profound Yin underworld bead, that would be terrible. Looks like I have to treat this little cat demon better in the future as well as I can. Only by winning her heart can I use her to its fullest potential and greatly increase the chances of obtaining the profound Yin underworld bead. Bingxian, this time you completed the mission well. The black-robed man's voice was gentle as he praised. I am very satisfied. Come forward. Bai Bingxuan's mind went blank. Completed well? Where did that come from? How did I complete the mission? Didn't I mess up the mission? Was he being sarcastic? Before Bai Bingxian could react, she felt a gentle sensation in her palm, and a faint fragrance wafted into her nose. Her entire body was filled with joy. The black-robed man had rewarded her with an entire pack of Cat Life Divine Lotus Pills. This was the favorite thing of the Nine Lives Cat clan. Although it was called a pill, it was actually a spiritual herb produced in the Demon Emperor's realm. The spiritual herb was in the form of a sheet, and other than emitting a unique scent, it had no other effects. The scent was completely ineffective to other demon clans. It was not even comparable to the most common spices. However, to the Cat Demon clan, it was a fatal temptation. Once the Nine Lives Cat Demon caught a whiff of the scent, they would feel as if they had ascended to immortality. They would feel an indescribable sense of elation. Since Bai Bingxian and the rest had left the Demon Emperor's realm, they had not come into contact with this spiritual herb for a long time. Now that they could smell the scent that they had been yearning for, they could not be more satisfied. She could not wait to take a piece out right there and then and experience the extreme ecstasy of ecstasy. How blissful, meow meow meow. Yunyang is a good person indeed. The idea he gave me is so useful, meow meow meow. In fact, it was not only Bai Bingxian, the other 5 cat subordinates' eyes were glowing as well. They stared at the big bag of Cat Life Divine Lotus Pills in Bai Bingxuan's hands, their faces filled with desire and fascination. Bingxian, the follow-up of the Nightmare Soul still depends on you. The black-robed man said amicably, don't slack off. This subordinate obeys, my lord. I shall not disobey your orders. If I'm not mistaken. The black-robed man pointed at the direction where the Nightmare Soul had gone and said faintly, it should be in that area. We still need to search carefully. Yes, this subordinate will bring them to search carefully. I will go with all of you. We must find out where the Nightmare Soul is in the shortest time possible. The black-robed man laughed and swept Bai Bingxian and the rest up with a wave of his sleeves, flying into the distance. Chapter 1187. It was the direction where the black-robed man had gone. On the other side, it was a pitch-black mountain forest with an extremely complicated terrain. At the same time, Yunyang was still busying himself in the forest on the other side. He seemed to have just finished his work. Wiping the sweat from his forehead, he murmured, 6 or 7, should be enough. Next, I'll let all of you search here in peace for a period of time. This young master has put in so much effort. It's not right that I don't have a considerable result. Before his voice echoed in the air, Yunyang's silhouette gradually faded away, turning into a gust of wind and leaving quietly. However, he happened to bump into Bai Bingxian and the others brushing past them. Bai Bingxian did not notice it at first, but she suddenly heard a clear voice in her ears, bring him around in circles here. Take at least a month, then we'll talk about the rest. Bai Bingxuan's expression did not change, but she was shocked inwardly. What cultivation base does this sect leader Yun have? He has suppressed us previously, but it has not reached the point of killing us instantly. Even if his ability is far superior, the disparity should not be too great. However, this master of mine has the cultivation base of a demon king. Yun Yang's voice was so close, but why did he not notice the latter at all? The two of them were clearly very close to each other, almost touching each other's bodies. Such an ability was more than just shocking. It was unimaginable and unbelievable. Yun Yang did not linger any longer, hurrying back to the residence of 9 Supremes. Although Yun Yang appeared calm and unruffled in front of Bai Bingxian, he was actually quite anxious. In the few days he had stayed here, especially on the last day, countless forces of karma had gathered from all directions, almost without a break from dawn to dusk. In other words, Yun Yang had been like an ocean for the past few days. Countless streams of karmic energy flowed into him at every moment of every day. What had happened was almost self-evident. At the very least, the residents of 9 Supremes had killed a lot of people, a lot of bad people, villains and cowards. Otherwise this would not have happened. It was true. During the period of time when Yun Yang was not around, the disciples who were still in the residence of 9 Supremes continued to cultivate and improve as hard as they could, while the top 10 disciples and the leaders of the residence of 9 Supremes who had gone out to train according to the original plan. Within a radius of 20,000 miles from the residence of 9 Supremes, there were traces of the residence of 9 Supremes disciples roaming the martial world. How dare you lie to me? Yun Xiaoxin pouted as she glanced at the dozen corpses in front of her eyes still filled with anger. It was not that Yun Xiao was narrow-minded, but, as the eldest senior sister of the residence of 9 Supremes, she had been deceived 7 to 8 times in less than a month of roaming the martial world. Of course she was furious. Of course, other than anger there was also a lot of embarrassment. After all, it was very embarrassing. Yun Xiaoxin still remembered the first time she was deceived after she came out. At first she thought she had met a few kind-hearted sisters, but in the end, the women's real intention was to drug her and kill her so that they could seize her spatial ring. Fortunately, she had cultivated successfully in the sect and was already immune to all kinds of poisons, so a mere drug was naturally not a problem for her. After killing those women, Yun Xiaoxin fell into a state of melancholy and even felt sorry for them. These people were killed by me just like that and I'm obviously fine. Is it really okay to kill them? The second time she was deceived, she was simply cheated of her money and she could not figure it out at first. It was only after a long time that she came to her senses. It was too embarrassing. The furious eldest senior sister rushed back to find the cheater and punish him severely. For the third time, Yun Xiaoxin pretended to be smart and showed off her amazing strength. Then she was respectfully invited into the stronghold as a distinguished guest, and so many people knelt in front of her and begged her to be their big sister. Yun Xiaoxin, who thought she had succeeded in her scheme, was overjoyed and satisfied the pleasure of being the big sister. However, the pleasant time was always short. After killing several batches of enemies who came to make trouble for her, she realized that her little brothers were all a group of people who committed all kinds of evil and heinous crimes. When she came forward to solve them, she was only helping the evildoer or becoming a scapegoat or cannon fodder. Realizing this, Yun Xiaoxin flew into a rage and naturally drew her sword to kill them. But then, the 4th time, the 5th time, the 6th time, I can't believe the hearts of the people in the martial world are so unfathomable. Eldest senior sister Yun Xiaoxin, who had encountered this many times, was indignant. Am I really so gullible? This is ridiculous. If her junior brothers and sisters knew about this, they would laugh at her to death. At the thought of this, Yun Xiaoxin felt a chill run down her spine. She absolutely could not let the second person know about this glorious history of hers. Absolutely not. A woman's voice calling for help came from the front. It must be another scoundrel bullying a woman. Without saying a word, Yun Xiaoxin rushed forward with righteous indignation and drew her saber to help. She was a chivalrous woman who was willing to take revenge. A long time passed. Yun Xiaoxin nodded and bowed, smiling at the 2 angry old men in front of her. I'm sorry. I didn't know. That woman is a thief. I'm really sorry. I'll take responsibility for what I've done. I'll compensate you for your losses. Sigh. She had only wanted to get their gratitude, but in the end all she got was complaints. It's so difficult to make a living in the martial world. There are too many liars. The bitterness in her heart grew stronger and stronger. It's said that there are many good people in the world, but why haven't I met many good people along the way? Instead, I've met one scoundrel, and scoundrel after scoundrel? Someone even tried to trick me and sell me into a brothel. Even though I'm extraordinarily beautiful, This behavior still deserves to die. The legendary martial world where a hero could save a damsel in distress within a few steps, where fine wine was everywhere, and where there were friends everywhere, did not seem to exist? The only thing worth rejoicing about was that she had gained a lot of knowledge and experience along the way as well as a lot of scheming. Sigh, I'll go back and practice as soon as the 2 months have passed. The martial world outside is too annoying and I don't like it everywhere. With a calm face, Bai Yexing pulled the sword out of the corpse in front of him. There are too many scoundrels like this in the martial world. If I don't kill them I won't feel good, and if I don't kill them, how can I take revenge? Beside him was Lin Xiaoro, whose face was filled with admiration. Senior brother Bai is amazing. These villains can't hide from your sharp eyes at all. This is already the 7th wave. Junior sister Lin, when you travel the martial world you must remember one thing first. There are no good people in the martial world. He must always carry this kind of vigilance when he roamed the Jianghu. Based on this premise, after careful screening, perhaps there would be 1 or 2 worthy friends out of 100. There would also be 1 or 2 who could be regarded as nodding acquaintances that could be made further. Don't take any chances. Otherwise you'll be at a disadvantage. If there comes a day when you roam the martial world alone, you must remember what I said today. Lin Xiaoro looked impressed. You know so much, senior brother Bai. You must teach me more in the future and I won't forget a single word. All right. With a cold face, Hu Xiaofan rushed out of Kangwu Union's main gate, bathed in blood and emanating a strong murderous aura. I'll be back, just you wait. Behind him was a series of Kangwu Union disciples. Catch him. We can't let that thief escape. He stole our sect's treasure, the mysterious king tripod. On a small boat on a wide river. Sun Mingxiu was as gentle and elegant as usual, drinking with a man in green on the opposite side. Brother Li, we've been together for many days. As the saying goes, we've become old friends in an instant. We've been through life and death together, and we've always treated each other with sincerity. I hope Brother Li will take care of yourself and we'll meet again someday. The man in green on the opposite side looked reluctant. Brother Sun, you should take care of yourself. We'll meet again in the martial world in the future and we'll definitely drink and chat happily. If you're free you must come to the Holy Soul Palace to visit me. Of course, of course. We'll meet again someday. We'll meet again someday. On the other side, in a beautiful garden, countless exotic flowers were competing with each other. Cheng Jiejia and a beautiful woman in white both knelt on the ground. The heavens above, the earth below, disciple Cheng Jiejia and sister Lian Fangfei are sworn sisters today. Although we're not willing to be born on the same day, I hope, sister. Sister. When you're free you must come to the Holy West Palace. I'll definitely go. The martial world is dangerous and unpredictable. Take care of yourself, sister. The same goes for sister. Watch and be careful. I'll remember sister's help for the rest of my life. I won't dare to forget it. Sister, don't forget that there's another sister in the Holy West Palace. Sister, don't forget that there's another sister in the residence of 9 Supremes. Of course, I'll pay a visit next time. I'll pay my respects to the immortal-like sect leader Yun, and see how handsome he is, hee. Sister, don't joke around. Master is an immortal-like person. Naturally, he's not a common person. Lu Changman walked out of a village with a long saber in his hand, covered in blood. His sleeves hung down and sticky blood dripped from time to time. The places he walked were full of red footprints, but none of them came from his own blood. Human traffickers should all be destroyed, they shouldn't exist in this world. This is the 9th human trafficker organization. I'm going to continue killing until the 2 months are up. Human traffickers, human kidnappers, all of them deserve to die, all of them. Yun Xiaoxin and the other top 10 disciples were not the only ones who were adventuring in the martial world. Shi Wuchen, Luo Dajiang and the others were not idle either. They had all chosen the direction where these disciples were going, doing their own things and practicing their martial skills while secretly watching these disciples. Ever since the residence of 9 Supremes officially advanced to a middle-class celestial luck banner, everyone could clearly feel that their cultivation speed was more than twice as fast as before. They had only been back in the residence of 9 Supremes for a little more than a month, but their cultivation base was about to break through the 4th-tier Saint King realm and reach the realm of Saint Emperor. In the past, when there were not many resources and the blessing of the celestial luck banner, even if they did their best and cultivated desperately, their progress was still limited, and they were still far behind their peers. It was inevitable that they would be discouraged. If it were not for this, Luo Dajiang and Jiang Luo, who were in love with each other in the past, would almost always hate each other. Now, with the blessing of the celestial luck banner and the many resources of the residents of Nine Supremes, they were surprised to find that their hard work in the past was not in vain. Instead, they had laid a stronger foundation than the disciples of those big sections. At this moment, these foundations were playing a role. If the cultivation speed of those geniuses in the residents of Nine Supremes was 1, then the progress of these people, who had been tempered and cultivated with the same aptitude, was at least 3. Everyone's hearts surged with emotions towards this common understanding. The road to rise was paved under their feet, and they no longer had to worry about moving forward. The others continued to cultivate their inherent cultivation methods, and there was no change in their state of mind. Only Shi Wuchen himself realized to his surprise that as his cultivation of the sword Tao improved and he went deeper into the sword realm, his emotions grew colder and colder. Even when he was in a life-and-death situation, he was still indifferent and had a heart of stone. This situation persisted until he was training with Yu Qinghang. When he saw Yu Qinghang being besieged, bathed in blood and on the brink of death, while he was still calmly watching from the sidelines, Shi Wuchen suddenly felt a sense of fear. That's my disciple. Why am I so calm when he died so soon? When did I become so indifferent? So heartless? I'm not indifferent or calm, I'm cold-blooded. Could it be that my cultivation has actually caused my blood to turn cold? Have I lost all my feelings? If that's the case, what's the point of my cultivation? Shi Wuchen's heart was greatly shaken, and he roared as he rushed out. However, he was still as calm as usual. He rescued his disciple from the siege and quickly left the area to treat his disciple's injuries. Then he turned to think about his current state. Have I taken the wrong path in my swordsmanship? The sword art should also be guarded. What I need to do now is to get my feelings back. Shi Wuchen stood on the top of the mountain for a long time, a full day and a night. During this time he did not know what he was thinking. No one knew his psychological journey during this time. But when he woke up, he suddenly stabbed his sword into his dantian without hesitation. I don't need such a heartless and cold-blooded sword heart. 8. Chapter 1188. Pooh. Shi Wuchen's face was ashen as he spat out a mouthful of blood. He could feel that his sword heart that had been cultivated to the point of being translucent like glass had shattered and ceased to exist. But at the same time he felt a sense of joy as if he had been reborn. The sword in his hand seemed to be filled with warmth at this moment, trembling slightly in his hand. Shi Wuchen looked at his sword with a pale face and murmured, "Do you think that I'm doing the right thing?" He laughed and suddenly said loudly, "Regardless of whether this is right or wrong, even if it is wrong, I will not regret it." It was on this day that the residents of Nine Supreme Second Supreme, revered sword Shi Wuchen, destroyed his own sword heart and sword Tao, cultivating the path of swordsmanship and creating a new guardian sword Tao. And it was from this very day onwards that the Shenhuang world gained yet another grandmaster level being in the truest sense of the word. Carrying on from the past, the Shenhuang world created a new saying for the sword Tao. Shi Wuchen. All along, the Tao of the sword had been the main path of cultivation in the entire Shenhuang world. It was an eternal theme. Sword Tao was merciless, heartless swordsman. This was a fact that was universally acknowledged. Very few people questioned the truth of this point. Even though there were far too many outstanding geniuses and prodigies of the sword who were unable to continue on this mainstream grand Tao and died prematurely on it, there were still even more who advanced wave after wave without wavering in their determination. Even if he walked to the end and paid so much on the path of the sword, it was still difficult to reach the true path. In the end he became a sword demon, a sword fanatic, but his infatuation did not change and he did not regret becoming a sword demon. He only cared about the sword Tao and he was stubborn. Outsiders might sigh at the fate of these people, but they would never doubt the sword Tao they pursued, especially the sacrifices and efforts they made for the sword Tao. Those were all things that could not be erased. Initially Shi Wuchen was like that as well. He had no other choice but to give his entire heart and soul to his sword. He was infatuated with the sword, devoted to the sword, and treated the sword as his master. Everything in the world, everything in this world was under the sword. It was as if, other than the sword, there was nothing else. It was because of this infatuation, this sincerity, and this stubbornness that Shi Wuchen had gradually grasped the pinnacle of swordsmanship. However, after he had gotten started and walked for a period of time, he discovered the flaw of this path. If he continued like this, he would continue to grow stronger. Regardless of whether it was his cultivation or battle prowess, his heart would also become cold and hard. Until his heart became as cold as iron, his entire person would be refined into a sword, emotionless, without love and without righteousness. Well, to put it more accurately, there was no longer any warmth in his heart. In other words, there was nothing else in his heart other than his sword. If it had been the Shi Wuchen of the past, he would not have hesitated at all. So what if he was heartless and heartless? It did not matter. In this world there was nothing worth worrying about. But now Shi Wuchen realized that he couldn't bear to let it go, and couldn't ignore it. My whole group of brothers, my whole group of disciples. As the number 2 figure of a super sect, I've been alone for half my life. I've finally obtained everything that I've dreamed of the most, and now I'm supposed to give it all up? Time, Because of this mentality, after weighing the pros and cons, Shi Wuchen resolutely gave up on the path of emotionless swordsmanship that he was halfway through. He was afraid. He was afraid that he would lose the things that he had worked so hard to obtain. He did not want to lose these things that he had once thought he would never be able to obtain. Swordsmanship is all-encompassing. I was able to walk this path of emotionlessness back then. Now, it's not impossible for me to walk another path of affection. Even if there is no path ahead and it's rugged and difficult to walk, I will forge my own path. My path will no longer be the path of emotionless swordsmanship, but the path of the sword of protection. Shi Wuchen brought his disciple along on the journey back. He had been gravely injured along the way, and his cultivation base had been reduced to less than 1/10 of what it was, but his heart was inexplicably relaxed and unburdened. It was as if the cultivation base that he had crippled was not that important. At least, it was not as important as the sense of relief that came from his heart. Shi Wuchen could even feel that there was a sword hum ringing in his dantian. When Yunyang returned, it was the second day of Shi Wuchen's closed-door cultivation, and he had passed by him perfectly. In spite of this, Yunyang's first reaction when he found out about the incident was, "Great." This time Shi Wuchen was the one who had comprehended it. No matter how far Shi Wuchen could go in the future, at least Yunyang felt an unusual warmth in his heart right now. Shi Wuchen had finally made a choice between his ability and his family. Not to mention anything else, just this choice alone made it worthwhile for the brothers to gather in the mortal world and get along with each other. Just as Yunyang arrived at the residence of 9 Supremes and took a quick glance around, he immediately noticed that the place had undergone a drastic change once again. There was almost no one in the residence as far as his eyes could see. In spite of this, the few fields were filled to the brim with people. Sensing the aura, Ping Xiaoyi and Guanuanyang, the 2 permanent members who had stayed behind, rushed over at once. "Boss, it's time to consider recruiting more disciples," Ping Xiaoyi said with an excited smile. The residence of 9 Supremes had grown from nothing to the scale it was today. Ping Xiaoyi felt that he now had a goal in life. Especially when he saw so many genius disciples emerging from the ranks of the disciples, Ping Xiaoyi felt that the vitality was boundless and that there was much to be done. His home was getting better and his days were getting better. The sense of accomplishment was naturally growing with each passing day. It's time to start recruiting new disciples. Yunyang mused and said, "Each peak can take in 50 true disciples, 200 inner disciples, and 500 outer disciples according to the peak's actual situation. The rest can be considered as menial disciples." "Do we need to divide them into generations of disciples?" asked Guanuanyang. "There's no need. This batch of disciples will still be the residence of 9 Supremes' first-generation disciples, but there's a time limit for teaching and answering questions. It can't be compared to direct disciples. The outer disciples after that can be taught by seed disciples and true disciples on behalf of their masters." Ping Xiaoyi and Guanuanyang agreed to it one after another. The matter was settled. "Next, it's your turn to recruit more disciples. The basic scale will be the same as ours. On this basis, you can give guidance as you wish if there's anyone that catches your eye." Yunyang rolled his eyes. "Both of you are no different from Shi Wuchen and the rest to me. It's the same for the residents of 9 Supremes as well. Therefore, your disciples will have to go through the assessment and participate in the martial contest. The entire sect will be the same, there will be no exceptions." If this assignment had been given to other sects, even if the person involved didn't show it on the surface, he would definitely be overjoyed. This was a transfer of great authority. But when Guoping heard this, their expressions turned bitter. "Boss, what we specialize in isn't the same as what you do. It's fine for us to give a few pointers, but when it comes to focusing on teaching disciples, this..." Firstly, the 2 of them specialized in different areas, and secondly, they were equally lazy. For the sake of freedom, to not care about anything, they did not even fight for the position of the 9 peak masters. They had always been lazing around, so their instinctive reaction was to push the responsibility away when Yun-Yang suddenly pinned it on them. I don't care about that, it's not the main point. You're all from the 10 finest talents, you can't be biased. It's your business to be at the bottom every day anyway. I'll just take it as watching. With a wave of his hand, Yun-Yang had settled the matter with a single blow. Both of them were dumbfounded. It's true that it's our business to be at the bottom every day, but we want our pride as well. We can't afford to be embarrassed like this. You can say whatever you want, but are we going to wash our faces with tears every day? Has there been any change in our sect during this period of time? Has there been any unforeseen events? Yun-Yang walked in as he spoke. There have been a lot of changes, a lot more. Guanyuanyang introduced with a smile. Ever since that day when the middle-class celestial luck banner suddenly flew over. After the detailed introduction he continued, Jiang Luoluo and her master, Gan Tianyin, are still guests in our residence. Boss, you don't know that Senior Gan is rather jealous? From what I see, she can't wait to take all of our disciples away. It's a pity that none of them are willing to go with her. Is that so? Yun-Yang's eyes shone. As he spoke, two slender silhouettes were already approaching him. It was Gan Tianyin and Jiang Luoluo. Sect leader Yun is finally back. Since we parted that day, your demeanor seems to have grown even more and your cultivation base has improved. Congratulations, congratulations. Gan Tianyin had long sensed Yun-Yang's return and had been itching to come and talk to Yun-Yang about his disciples, but it was only right to let Yun-Yang understand his sect's situation first. Therefore, he had been holding it in until now and had only come when he could no longer hold it in. Once he saw Yun-Yang, he was shocked. It had only been a short period of time since they parted, but Yun-Yang's cultivation base had improved tremendously. The phrase, 1,000 miles in a day, was not enough to describe the progress of his cultivation base. It was terrifying. Senior, you're the one who's shining. Yun-Yang laughed. Sect leader Yun, this old one has come to discuss something with you. Gan Tianyin had been holding back his words for more than a month. Now that he had finally met the highest authority of the residence of 9 Supremes, how could he hold it in any longer? He spoke his mind and went straight to the topic. Then, Senior, please, let's talk as we walk. Yun-Yang walked towards his main hall. Regarding your residence's disciples. Sect leader Yun, what do you plan to do? Gan Tianyin went straight to the point. Your residence has more than 14,000 disciples. Sect leader Yun, forgive this old one for being disrespectful, but it's obviously far from enough to train so many disciples with just the manpower of your residence's upper echelon. Yun-Yang nodded. Senior is frank. This is indeed my residence's current biggest shortcoming. Gan Tianyin smiled and said, since sect leader Yun doesn't deny it, I'll say one more thing. Your residence's disciples are all outstanding and gifted. If they can't receive the appropriate guidance because of this, it's a waste of God's gift and a pearl covered in dust. Yun-Yang smiled faintly and said calmly, it's indeed a bit of a pity. I wonder what Senior can teach me? Gan Tianyin said with a face full of pity, Sect leader Yun, please don't blame this old one for talking too much. It's true that many of your residence's disciples are talented and beautiful. It's definitely not enough to rely on the 9 supreme elders of the residence of 9 supremes. It's bound to cause many disciples to be unable to receive teachings that match their talents. It's a waste of time. Sect leader, you're also an expert in cultivation. You should know that once you miss these few years of foundation building in the future. Yun-Yang chuckled. Senior, please speak your mind. I won't be offended. Gan Tianyin smiled and said, Sect leader Yun, you're a straightforward person, so I won't beat around the bush. This is my plan. Since it's difficult for your residence to train so many disciples, I wonder if you can allocate some of them to the Phoenix Cry sect? Yun-Yang thought about it and said faintly, in terms of principle, no sect will give away the disciples that they've already recruited. At least, the residence of 9 Supremes disciples are not allowed to leave. The reason why we've trained dozens of them first is not only to train them but also to save them. When the time is right, these disciples who have entered the sect earlier can be taught on behalf of their masters. Now, there are already 60 to 70 disciples who can fulfill this duty. As for the new disciples that we're going to recruit, although there are thousands of them, if they're spread out, there'll only be dozens of them for each of the first-generation disciples. As long as they're diligent, one person can manage and teach 60 to 70 people or even 100 people. Even if mistakes are inevitable, it won't be a big problem. The foundation stage is important, but as long as the theory is explained clearly and the resources allocated can keep up, there'll be opportunities for improvement with individual effort. They don't necessarily need the guidance of famous teachers or the teachings of experts. Because the cultivation method of a sect is the same. Yun Yang smiled calmly. Gan Tianyin was a little dumbfounded by Yun Yang's words. Indeed, Yun Yang's theory was feasible. Although the guidance and training of famous teachers were important, the training of the foundation stage was almost the same. For example, Gan Tianyin dared not say that he was much better than Yun Yang, Shi Wuchen, or even Yun Xiuxin. Instead, the resources allocated were the most important, and the residence of 9 Supremes was obviously more than enough. Moreover, Gan Tianyin had seen that these children of the residence of 9 Supremes did not need to be managed at all during this period of time. As long as they were given the cultivation method, every single one of them would be self-aware and self-reliant. They would eagerly and desperately cultivate, working hard to improve. There was no need for the so-called supervision at all. They cherished the cultivation opportunity they had more than ordinary cultivators. In such an environment, the so-called training and cultivation really did not have much meaning. Among the 60 to 70 disciples, there would be an obvious competitive mechanism, each more hard-working and desperate than the other. If this went on, not only would it be feasible, it would be very feasible. Moreover, Yun Yang and the other higher-ups would be more relaxed because of this model. They would definitely be more relaxed than they were now. Thinking of this, Gan Tianyin could not help feeling a little lost. Before Yun Yang came back, Guanuanying and Ping Xiaoyi's explanation was already rather flexible. As long as the target disciples are willing, you can take as many as you can. Therefore, Gan Tianyin had high hopes for this conversation with Yun Yang. Who would have thought that Yun Yang's return would seal the last remaining gap? How could he explain this? Could his plan fall through just like that? Was it all for naught? Jiang Luoluo, who had been following them with her head lowered, had not spoken a word throughout the entire journey. Now, however, she almost burst out laughing, covering her mouth quickly as her eyes darted about. All the words that Gan Tianyin had prepared were swallowed back by Yun Yang's words. For a moment she did not know what to say. She stammered, but... Chapter 1189. For a moment, Gan Tianyin was ashamed and angry from being fooled. She looked at Yun Yang speechless. Yun Yang said with a smile, "However, since Senior Gan has spoken, I have to give you face. Our families are in-laws, so of course we are different. As long as the goodies are kept within the family, it's fine." As his voice trailed off, Yun Yang fell into deep thought and did not speak for a long time. Gan Tianyin's eyes lit up. She knew that Yun Yang had relented not only because the matter had changed, but because it was definitely feasible. Yun Yang thought for a moment and said in a low voice, We can do this. Senior is my sister-in-law's master. We are not outsiders, so of course we have to give you face. However, your sect and this residence are not the same sect after all. The residence of 9 Supremes has just been established, and there are many things waiting to be done. How about this? What do you think the Phoenix Cry sect has to exchange with us? Exchange? Gan Tianyin's eyes widened. Does this mean that you want me to buy it? Yun Yang smiled amiably. Senior, please don't misunderstand. This junior doesn't mean that, and I'm not a merchant. Isn't it cliché to use money with our relationship? What our sect needs is just a little bit of sincerity. Whether it's rare metals, treasures of heaven and earth, or cultivation methods and arcane manuals, all of these are fine. Your sect can do whatever you want. He smiled sheepishly and sighed again. Your sect is one of the top 3 sects with middle-class celestial luck banners. Perhaps you look down on this junior's stinginess, but this is the current situation of our residence. We lack all of these things. Very much so. Gan Tianyin took a deep breath and swallowed it forcefully, saying, We do have all of these. Yun Yang replied, Your sect can do whatever you want, but it's just a little bit of sincerity. Whatever? Sincerity? Gan Tianyin was immediately annoyed. Whatever? Can it really be whatever? If you're willing to give it to someone with just a little bit of sincerity, I'm afraid you'll have to find a better one. She lowered her head and thought for a while before saying, I wonder how many disciples sect leader Yun can give? Our sect has been established for a long time. I'm confident that we have some resource reserves. Yun Yang chuckled and waved his hand in a forthright manner, saying, Senior is a forthright man and straightforward. Including the top 10 disciples who are going to the flag, Senior only needs to call out to any of the disciples you fancy. Including the top 10 disciples who went to Celestial Luck Banner, Senior, feel free to call anyone you like. As long as they agree, we won't interfere. Even if Senior takes all the 14,000 disciples in our residence, I won't say anything. There were two words that almost slipped out of his mouth. F***CK. At the end of the day, the problem was back to square one. Voluntary? Moreover, before you came back, we didn't need to pay any price for this to be carried out. Now that you've come back, you've made a long speech and you've even asked for this and that, and you've given me the same promise as before. Moreover, it's completely useless? Gan Tianyin stood up abruptly. His face was ashen as he gritted his teeth. Sect leader Yun, your generosity has really broadened my horizons. It's really eye-opening. Yun Yang said innocently, if Senior has any other thoughts, you can totally bring them up and say it in person. What's the harm in having an open and honest exchange? I've just returned to the residence. Perhaps there are some things that I'm not as familiar with as Senior. Gan Tianyin was furious, her chest rising and falling rapidly. Her emotions were on the verge of losing control. She suddenly recalled a junior sister in the sect who would mutter to herself through gritted teeth every time she was angry, so angry that my breasts hurt. Both of them hurt. Gan Tianyin, who used to be in a high position and whose status was only below the sect leader, had never experienced such a thing. Today, however, she truly understood the profound meaning of this phrase. It turned out that both of them could really hurt from anger. The innocent expression on Yun Yang's face made Gan Tianyin feel like she was about to explode from anger. Gan Tianyin panted heavily for a moment before she said coldly, Sect leader Yun, you don't have to play dumb. Before you came back, I've already tried for a long time. Those who are willing to go with me are few and far between. If that's not the case, why would I need to trouble sect leader Yun? Gan Tianyin had no choice but to swallow her anger. It was because the current batch of disciples in Yun Yang's residence of 9 Supremes were too outstanding. They were too talented. As long as there was a chance, she would not let it go. Yun Yang coughed awkwardly. I see. Well. Then, he said with a troubled expression, Senior Gan, I can understand your feelings, but it's true that the residence of 9 Supremes has many disciples, and it's also true that the teachers are insufficient. These are all true. However, if the disciples are unwilling to leave but the sect orders them to leave, it'll be a huge blow to the disciples' state of mind. How much effort will it take to make up for it later? Are you willing to take this risk? Are you willing to bear the consequences? If you're really willing, I can reluctantly do it. Gan Tianyin was speechless for a long while after Yun Yang said that. What Yun Yang had said was true. If the disciples were unwilling to leave, could the residents of 9 Supremes still chase them away by force? Their hearts were divided. Based on the sense of belonging the residents of 9 Supremes disciples had to the residents of 9 Supremes, if such a situation were to happen, the expelled disciples' state of mind would definitely be hard to maintain. Disciples who lacked a state of mind would have limited achievements in the future, no matter how gifted they were. There was no room for nurturing such disciples. Furthermore, if the residents of 9 Supremes really did so and did as the Phoenix Cry sect wanted, who else would be willing to join the residents of 9 Supremes in the future? Even the disciples could not be protected and were taken away just like that. There was no sense of security at all. If there were any other ways, they would never be willing to join such a sect. Is there no one in your sect that is not very valued, even if it's a disciple who might be eliminated? Gan Tianyin was melancholy. Yin Yang rolled his eyes. Not very valued? Might be eliminated? The residents of 9 Supremes had such disciples. There were a lot of them and they were everywhere. Currently, none of the residents of 9 Supremes disciples received special attention. Everyone cultivated diligently on their own. It was precisely because of this that everyone's path was similar. At least, the starting point was the same and there was no difference between them. Similarly, everyone's chances of being eliminated were the same, so everyone had the possibility of being eliminated. In other words, all the residents of 9 Supremes disciples were not very valued, and all of them had the possibility of being eliminated. However, under the current spiritual chi of the residents of 9 Supremes, even the most useless of them could break through a few chakras. Moreover, these little fellows were all gifted. As long as they were given time, none of them would be useless. Under such a premise, as long as the person involved did not give up, it was not easy to figure out who would be eliminated in the end. Senior, you've been a guest in the residence of 9 Supremes for some time. I'm afraid you know more about the recent affairs of the residents of 9 Supremes than I do. Of course, you know the situation and mentality of these disciples better. Do you have to do that from us? Yun Yang rubbed the space between his brows, feeling a headache coming on. His meaning was clear. These are all our disciples. Do you Phoenix Cry sect have to take advantage of us? Do you have to bite a piece of meat? Can't we not bite? Hearing Yun Yang's words, Gan Tianyin was speechless, and his embarrassment was written all over his face. Yes, it was one thing that the residents of Nine Supremes did not have enough teachers, but why did they have to share their lack of teachers with their disciples? Moreover, there were many talented disciples. What kind of logic was this? Even if the Phoenix Cry sect was a prestigious sect, it could not be so overbearing. To put it more seriously, taking disciples by force was a serious matter of cutting off one's future and damaging one's foundation. No matter what, it was the Phoenix Cry sect's fault. However, Gan Tianyin was not reconciled to it. Under normal circumstances, the act of taking outstanding disciples by force was naturally not desirable. No matter how passionate one's thoughts were, few sects dared to take action. However, the residents of Nine Supremes had too many talented disciples, far exceeding the maximum training limit that the residents of Nine Supremes could currently train and cultivate. Moreover, Gan Tianyin did not intend to take those with the highest talent, which was why he had spoken. In fact, Gan Tianyin himself was puzzled. Where did the residents of Nine Supremes find so many talented disciples? The number of outstanding disciples in the residents of Nine Supremes was more than 14,000. Even if all the sects with celestial luck banners were included, the number would not be more than this. If he had not seen it with his own eyes, he would not have believed it. Over the years, the competition between the sects with celestial luck banners has become more intense. Disciples with good aptitude are as rare as phoenix feathers and unicorn horns. What's more, the reason why the sects with celestial luck banners have such abundant spiritual chi is not without a price. The price of gathering such a massive amount of spiritual chi is to transfer all the spiritual chi from the nearby mortal lands. The spiritual chi of heaven and earth is constant, and once the spiritual chi of a region is highly concentrated in one place, the spiritual chi in a certain range around it will inevitably die out. Similarly, the probability of geniuses appearing in the mortal world, where the spiritual chi is thinner. Gan Tianyin heaved a long sigh. Even if he did not take into account the fact that the spiritual chi was thin, the probability of geniuses appearing in the mortal world was still minuscule. Basically, there would only be one in a few million people. Otherwise, how could there be the term genius? In recent years, it has become more and more difficult for the sects to find their successors. When I came to the residence of Nine Supremes this time, I was surprised to see the gathering of geniuses, all of whom are talented. It's really difficult for me to suppress my desire to cherish talents, which is why I'm so bold to ask. Now that sect leader Yun has many concerns and the truth is that you are in a dilemma, I won't force you. After all, it's not necessary to divide the disciples if there are too many talented disciples in the sect to teach them all. Gan Tianyin's eyes were filled with sadness as she sighed. Yun Yang observed his expression and felt that it was about time. He smiled and said, "Senior, don't be anxious. We can discuss this matter at length?" Gan Tianyin asked in surprise. "What else can we discuss at length?" Yun Yang said, "Phoenix Cry sect has resources and many cultivation seniors, but it doesn't have many disciples that can be taught. Perhaps, it should be said that the number of talented disciples is very limited, while the residence of Nine Supremes has many disciples that can be taught. Although it's difficult for our disciples to transfer to your sect, it's not impossible for us to compromise and try to cooperate. Perhaps we can both get what we want." Compromise? Cooperation? How do you say? The teachers in Phoenix Cry sect who have free time can come to the residence of Nine Supremes to teach disciples. They can also bring back the disciples they like to teach. The only restriction is that they have to wait until the residence of Nine Supremes has chosen their inner disciples. Gan Tianyin's expression turned cold. Sect leader Yun, what a good plan. Is your so-called cooperation to let Phoenix Cry sect provide manpower and help the residents of Nine Supremes train their disciples in exchange for all the benefits? Yun Yang smiled and said, "Senior, you are mistaken. The residents of Nine Supremes disciples will retain their identity, but when they are successful in their studies, they will have a chance to choose which sect they will belong to in the future." Gan Tianyin was dumbfounded. In other words, when they are successful in their studies and choose to become Phoenix Cry sect's disciples, they will only be Phoenix Cry sect's disciples. Similarly, if they still choose to be residents of Nine Supremes disciples, they will only be residents of Nine Supremes disciples. Ping Xiaoyi and Guo Nuanyang, who stood beside him, did not say a word as Yun Yang finished his narration leisurely. Gan Tianyin snorted and said, "What's the difference between this and before? If the disciples still choose to become disciples of the residents of Nine Supremes at that time, wouldn't all the efforts of the Phoenix Cry sect over the years be in vain? Well, to be more precise, it's all for the residents of Nine Supremes? Gan Tianyin was extremely fearful of this point. During this period of time, she had been troubled by the residents of Nine Supremes' disciples' sense of identity towards the residents of Nine Supremes itself. If there were truly people who wavered, they would not have waited until today, they would have left with their people long ago. Yun Yang said faintly, "This collaboration is meant to give your sect a chance. If the master-disciple bond that has been cultivated over the years can't change a person's mind, shouldn't it be the teacher's own reflection? What Senior said just now is a possibility. Perhaps, after many years, those disciples who have been nurtured will all choose to become disciples of Phoenix Cry sect to serve their master after they have grown up. Wouldn't that be a greater loss for the residents of Nine Supremes? There are pros and cons to this collaboration. Your sect has deployed a lot of manpower and resources, but in the process of cultivating these disciples, if they were in the residence of Nine Supremes, the spiritual chi and resources used for cultivation would all be provided by the residents of Nine Supremes. Now, Senior, do you still think that the residents of Nine Supremes would benefit from this collaboration? Gan Tianyin was stunned, lowering her head in thought. Yin Yang was right. It was impossible to erase the years of teacher-disciple relationship. If he was unable to influence the disciples' feelings, then it would really be the problem of the teacher. When the time came, it might be delusional to say that he could take all of them away, but it was still reasonable to take half of them away. Moreover, all the resources and spiritual chi of the venue would be provided by the residents of Nine Supremes. What she needed to contribute was only a few elites and a few cultivation methods. That was all. In this way, the situation was not only the residents of Nine Supremes getting all the benefits, it could almost be said that the Phoenix Cry sect was using the residents of Nine Supremes' resources to cultivate its own disciples. Don't forget, as long as the disciple cultivates our Phoenix Cry sect's cultivation method, he or she will use our Phoenix Cry sect's cultivation method when he or she attacks in the future. Isn't that the same as having the Phoenix Cry sect's imprint on their body? Gan Tianyin looked hesitant, but in fact she had already agreed in her heart. She had even begun to plan who would come over in the future. She would not allow those who were not steady, hot-tempered, and those who were always weird. She would even skip those who were weak. She must choose those who were strong, absolutely reliable, and had a good temperament. After a while, Gan Tianyin said in a low voice, "Sect leader Yun's proposal of cooperation is indeed worth discussing. However, this is a serious matter. I need to go back and discuss it with the sect leader and the few elders." Yun Yang laughed heartily and said, "Of course. Of course. In fact, whether your sect agrees or not, it doesn't affect the relationship between our two sections. After all, with Lolua's sister-in-law here, the relationship between us is unbreakable." Gan Tianyin nodded slowly. Yun Yang's words were more realistic, but she still needed to go back and discuss the specific details. If she made a decision now, she would be suspected of overstepping her authority. Both parties exchanged a few more pleasantries. Gan Tianyin's emotions were getting more and more difficult to conceal. Soon, she bade farewell to Yun Yang and left the residence of Nine Supremes without stopping, returning to the Phoenix Cry sect in the night. It was more important to decide on this matter as soon as possible. Along the way they chased after the clouds and broke through the fog, traveling at lightning speed. They traveled day and night in hopes of returning as soon as possible. Gan Tianyin pondered as she hurried back. There were a total of 17 to 18 Saint Kings and 3 Royal Saints in the sect. There should be at least 7 to 8 of them who could be sent out. 7 or 8 people, if each of them taught 30 disciples, then at least 200 disciples could be taught. As long as the master and the disciple got along well with each other, and the friendship was real, after a few years, when the disciple's body reached the initial level, wouldn't it mean that the Phoenix Cry sect suddenly had more than 200 talented disciples? As long as they had this foundation, it was not impossible for the Phoenix Cry sect to advance into the top 3 classes. It might even be possible for them to ascend to the palace level by then. One had to know that even a palace sect might not have 200 to 300 excellent disciples. Inside the residence of Nine Supremes, Ping Xiaoyi and Guanyuanyang looked at Yun Yang and stuttered, "Boss, what do you mean by this? Isn't it too risky?" From their point of view, if the Phoenix Cry sect were to take in disciples here, even if the disciples who were trained would still bear the title of the residence of Nine Supremes disciple for the time being, the situation would be very different after a few years. The gratitude of being a master was not just a saying, it was an emotion that could not be erased. If that was the case, it would be better to be poached away right now. If they were poached away now, The only thing that would be lost would be a few young fellows who had yet to grow up and were less determined. The loss would be negligible, but it would be a pity if they were poached away after they had grown up. It might even be a huge loss. Don't be so nervous. Yun Yang chuckled and comforted them. I've said it from the beginning. This is a collaboration. Of course there are pros and cons. Even if the Phoenix Cry sect really poached away a few hundred people, it's only a few hundred people. We still have more than 10,000 on our side. The ones we lose will only be a fraction. There's no need to worry too much. Ping Xiaoyi said, You're too optimistic. I'd better go and select the disciples quickly. I'll pick out those who are talented first. It's not advisable to sacrifice for others. How can you do that? Yun Yang said unhappily, Since we're planning to facilitate the collaboration, we should show our goodwill and sincerity. What's the point of them coming if we're only going to leave them some useless people? We should show the greatest sincerity to our brother sects who have established a friendly relationship. We should open our hearts and let them feel ashamed. Guanuanyang was dumbfounded. Ping Xiaoyi was tongue-tied. Shuang had nothing to say. This sanctimonious and modest gentleman in front of us, is he really our boss? Where was the sky that was once 9 feet high? Where was the promise of plucking the feathers of a swallow? How could it be like this? Yun Yang said righteously, My 2 brothers, one must be magnanimous as a person. Be magnanimous. Chapter 1190. Where is Instructor Dong now? Asked Yun Yang. They stopped talking about the Phoenix Cry sect. To Yun Yang it was only a hypothesis. Whether it could succeed or not, it was all up to the heavens. The highest place. Guanuanyang mumbled, He's sitting right under the celestial luck banner. Ever since the celestial luck banner flew here, the old man has been sitting under it and hasn't moved at all. I'll go talk to him. The older the wiser. It's rare to have something in common with you guys. Yun Yang stood up and left, leaving Guanuanyang and Ping Xiaoyi who were rolling their eyes in anger. Dong Qitian was sitting cross-legged under the residence of 9 Supreme's middle-class celestial luck banner, just as Guoping and Ping Xiaoyi had said, bathing in the howling spiritual qi that blew against his face. With a soft whooshing sound, 2 thick white mists suddenly sprayed out from his nostrils. They were like 2 long dragons that stretched for hundreds of feet. From head to tail they were the same thickness as if they were real. Not only did the 2 puffs of white air that seemed to have materialized come to an end, they hovered in the air for half a cup of tea's time before Dong Qitian inhaled softly. The 2 puffs of white air connected at the farthest end, forming a large, enclosed semicircle that flew back at top speed. The white mist did not simply retract, but all the spiritual qi that the white mist touched, no less than 500 feet in radius, was swept back to Dong Qitian's nostrils with a whooshing sound. As Dong Qitian's inhalation and exhalation ended, a huge whirlpool appeared in the space where the white mist had been. It was an absolute vacuum that had appeared due to the rapid disappearance of spiritual qi. Spiritual qi surged in from all directions like a tsunami. In just a blink of an eye, the spiritual qi vacuum created by Dong Qitian's breathing of spiritual qi was filled to the brim. Old Dong was not bothered by the change. Only his flat stomach was slightly protruding, but with a shudder, his stomach deflated and returned to its original state. After about half a cup of tea's time, there was another whooshing sound as another 2 long dragons flew out. The interval between his inhalation and exhalation was about the time it took to brew a cup of tea, which was almost an hour. Yun Yang watched from the side and could not help feeling delighted, feeling that his horizons had been broadened. Dong Qitian's cultivation method was inconceivable, but the efficiency was equally inconceivable and appalling. As far as Yun Yang knew, anyone who cultivated and breathed would try their best to absorb the surrounding spiritual qi into their body, then refine it with the cultivation method they cultivated and turn it into their own. There were very few who were greedy and impatient, blindly absorbing the spiritual qi like a whale swallowing the ocean. Dong Qitian's cultivation method, on the other hand, did not care how much spiritual qi there was around him. He absorbed it all in one fell swoop before refining it fully and integrating it into his body. Such a method of forcefully seizing and absorbing spiritual energy was simply infuriating and deranged. Although Yun Yang was delighted, he did not disturb Dong Qitian. Instead he chose to watch patiently. He wanted to see how Dong Qitian would proceed, and whether he would only be able to absorb the spiritual qi in front of him and not be able to take care of the other directions. Although the spiritual qi vacuum in front of him seemed to be filled up by the surging spiritual qi, it was only filled in terms of volume. The quality of the spiritual qi was far inferior to what it was before. The quality of the spiritual qi around Dong Qitian and behind him was no different from the wave of spiritual qi that he had absorbed earlier. Another breath passed. As if to prove Yun Yang's guess, there was another soft whooshing sound. When the two white dragons appeared again, they chose to spiral backward in a giant semicircle. Another 2 breaths later, the whooshing sound returned. After the buffer time of 3 cups of tea, the concentration of spiritual qi in the space in front of Dong Qitian was fully replenished. It was enough for him to whooshing out and gather a new wave of spiritual qi. Observing the cycle in detail, Yun Yang finally understood the situation. There was no need to absorb the spiritual qi around him anymore. The semicircle in front and the semicircle at the back had already absorbed the space around him, with little to no leakage. Other than the spiritual qi left for the disciples below, the rest of the spiritual qi was all occupied by old man Dong alone. He was fully utilized without any leakage. By the time Dong Qitian opened his eyes and ended this round of cultivation, it was already midnight. Yun Yang's gaze met Dong Qitian's. Just as he opened his eyes, he was shocked to realize that there seemed to be a galaxy shining in Dong Qitian's eyes. Even with Yun Yang's composure, he could not help but be mesmerized. At that moment, he felt as if his soul had wandered through the galaxy and was no longer himself. Yun Yang's heart was filled with terror. He quickly closed his eyes and paused for a moment before opening them again. Realizing that everything before him had returned to its original state, he could not help but break out in a cold sweat despite his relief. The legendary sight of a single glance was probably nothing more than this. It was truly frightening and appalling. Dong Qitian was still sitting where he was, watching Yun Yang quietly without moving. A warm smile bloomed on his face. "Young Yun, your cultivation base has improved greatly again. Such an improvement is truly remarkable." Yun Yang chuckled humorlessly. "You're flattering me, senior. This junior's improvement is far inferior to yours. It's not even enough to describe it as the difference between heaven and earth. It looks like, senior, you've broken through your previous realm again?" Dong Qitian smiled faintly and said, "It's just a coincidence." At this moment, Dong Qitian was calm and collected, even vaguely exuding an otherworldly aura. He was like a completely different person compared to before. He said softly, "I'm not praising you casually when I say that your cultivation base is impressive, but I'm speaking from the bottom of my heart. There's a difference in our cultivation base. The total amount of heaven and earth spiritual qi that I can absorb in one breath is 1,000 times more than what you can absorb in one breath. Of course, my cultivation base is faster than yours. But at my cultivation level, the amount of spiritual qi accumulated between each level is also much more than yours. How can this be mentioned in the same breath?" "You're right, senior. I understand this, of course. Thank you for your guidance, senior. I heard your conversation with the little girl from the Phoenix Cry sect just now. You're not someone who's easy to talk to. I guess you're up to something again, aren't you?" Dong Qitian turned to ask. This was the difference in status. Gan Tianyin was an old senior in the eyes of many martial artists in the Bound of Universe. She was far above everyone in the residence of 9 Supremes, including Yun Yang. However, she was still a little girl in Dong Qitian's mouth. Yun Yang sweated. "What are you talking about, senior? How could I be up to something? I've always been easy to talk to." Dong Qitian snorted and said, "Easy to talk to? You brat, you think you're easy to talk to, but can you do it yourself? Or perhaps you've made another breakthrough in your ability to talk to me now. I've experienced it firsthand. I know that you've never done anything without benefits. You're a master who even Yenguo wants. If you don't have a big scheme, how could you allow the Phoenix Cry sect to stay in the residence of 9 Supremes for a long time? You even opened a class to recruit disciples? You must be up to something. Am I right?" Yun Yang defended himself. "I really don't. I just think that what Senior Gan said makes sense. I want my disciples to be well too." Dong Qitian snorted, no longer bothering with him. He said casually, all right. I don't have the time to listen to your glib talk. Let's just say that you're selfless. Just tell me what you're here for." "There's indeed something." Yun Yang flashed a cute smile. "I'll need Elder Dong's help for this to happen. Just spit it out. Don't King beat around the bush." Yun Yang told him about the Lei family and said, "According to that girl, her master is a Demon King pinnacle expert. I'm worried that I can't handle it alone. It's just a Demon King, what pinnacle? Do you think people who cultivate to the pinnacle are so worthless?" Dong Qitian's disdain towards Yun Yang's words was evident in his words and did not bother to hide it. "There's something else." Yun Yang then told him about Sacred Heart Palace's Zhan Wufei's mission, especially the suspicions related to great elder Lei Qianli. He said, "I'm afraid that, if I were to stir up an immeasurable incident, how can I, a junior with small shoulders, be of any help? I really can't handle it." "Zhan Wufei is still the hall master now," Dong Qitian murmured, a hint of nostalgia flashing in his eyes. His transcendental aura vanished at once, as if he had returned to the mortal realm. Yunyang could not help being stunned. Zhan Wufei. How could he not be the hall master? Wait a moment. Perhaps there was something strange about this matter, but it could also be attributed to the lotus root. He remembered Feng Guohai mentioning that the battle between the Nine Lives Cat and Hall Master Hua had brought the Sacred Heart Palace's 30,000 years of peace. However, Bai Bingxian had said that the Nine Lives Cat had been imprisoned more than 1,000 years ago. The time span between this period of time seemed to be extremely different. 8,000 years and 30,000 years could not be mentioned in the same breath. Just what unforeseen event could have caused such a huge difference in time? If what Feng Guohai said was true, did that not mean that Zhan Wufei had already been the Sacred Heart Palace's hall master for 30,000 years? At least 20,000 years. Judging from his appearance, however, he did not look like a hall master at all. If this matter is really as you said, it's not a small matter. Dong Qitian sucked in a breath and mumbled to himself, deep in thought. "All right, I'll go with you to take a look." Yunyang felt his body lighten up when he achieved his goal. It should be enough to have an expert like Dong Qitian by his side, right? "Senior Dong, this junior has always had a question in his heart. Who was the person who imprisoned you back then?" Yunyang asked. As he grew more familiar with the bound of universe, Yunyang felt more and more that Dong Qitian was extraordinary. Yunyang even felt that even Sacred Heart Palace's hall master Zhan Wufei, whom he had met before, might not be much stronger than Dong Qitian. However, such an earth-shattering figure had been imprisoned in that cave for more than 4,000 years. In that case, just what level of cultivation did the person who imprisoned him have? What kind of peerless character could have such capabilities and methods? Dong Qitian shuddered violently and said angrily, "Why are you asking all this, child?" "Well," Yunyang said doubtfully, "can't I even mention that person's name?" Can't. Dong Qitian shook his head repeatedly, his face turning pale. Perhaps it was because he was too terrified. Dong Qitian looked around instinctively, as if the person he was most afraid of could appear at any time. Yunyang was dumbfounded. What kind of person was this person to be able to make Dong Qitian dare not even mention him today? Was this matter too advanced and far beyond his knowledge, or was it extremely bizarre and beyond his imagination? "Stop with the nonsense. Just tell me, when are we leaving?" Dong Qitian took the initiative to change the topic. "There's no hurry to wait for a few days. We need to catch our breath even if we're going to hang ourselves. I've just returned to the residence, let me rest for 2 days." Yunyang calculated the time in his heart. The things he had set up could at least drag on for half a month. "It's not too late to wait for Dajiang and the rest to come back," he said. A few days passed just like that. Lan Ruojuan was the first to return, followed by Tai Chingtsang and the rest. When these people returned, the disciples they were watching over basically came back from outside as well. Knowing that Yunyang had returned, everyone came forward to report the whole process of the training outside. Each of them did not know whether to laugh or cry as they recounted their disciples' actions outside with great relish. Even Yunyang felt that he had gained a lot of knowledge after listening to the many encounters his disciples had gone through. Indeed, the world was vast and full of wonders. Not only were there disciples who were repeatedly deceived after going out, but there were also those who turned around and swindled others. If it was not unusual for those who went out to make friends, it was unusual for those who went out to rob others. There were also those who went out to cause trouble in other sects and kept looking for people to spar with. All in all, there were all kinds of wonders. There were only weirder and weirder, but there was no weirdest. There was also a disciple who went all the way to Phoenix Cry sect to challenge Chi Lai after going out to train a few times. If he had not been stopped halfway, he might have been killed in Phoenix Cry sect. Although the standard of the top 10 disciples of the residents of Nine Supremes was not mediocre, there was still a considerable gap between them and the level of Phoenix Cry sect's Chi Lai. Even Luo Dajiang, Lan Ruojuan, and the rest whose abilities had improved, were probably not a match for them. Only Shi Wuchen, who was in closed-door cultivation, did not attend the gathering of the residents of Nine Supremes this time. His disciple Yu Qinghang took his place. Overall, the results of everyone's training are not bad. Luo Dajiang concluded and said, "At least no one has embarrassed the residents of Nine Supremes." Go out to train after a period of cultivation to hone your state of mind and broaden your horizons," said Yunyang. Let's divide this into 2 parts. 1 month of training, 2 months of cultivation. When you go out to train, remember to split up. Don't go out all at once. Leave some people behind to take on the responsibility of teaching the new disciples. Yes. What followed was to check on the specific progress of the disciples, set new cultivation goals, and even teach new combat skills and cultivation methods. In short, it was a series of trivial matters. Of course, there was also the matter of preparing to recruit new disciples. It was also at this time that Chen Duo, who was getting rounder and rounder, finally had his turn to speak. Feeling that his position was seriously threatened, the little fatty looked at Yunyang with grievance and said, "Boss, you said, the major domo is the second person in our sect and he controls everything in the sect." That tone, it was filled with hidden bitterness. Yunyang coughed and said, "Everyone in the residence of 9 Supremes needs to fight for it with their own ability, fatty. As long as you can defeat Shi Wuchen, Luo Dajiang, and the others, you'll be the real second person. There's absolutely no doubt about this, but there's no possibility of trickery either. Ability is the absolute truth." Chen Duo looked pale. "This?" Luo Dajiang said with a smile. Duo, as long as your disciples can defeat my disciples, I don't mind giving up my position." Chen Duo's cheeks trembled. "Do you think it's possible?" "Nothing is impossible. Work hard, fatty." The demiurge Flawed 10 patted Chen Duo's chubby shoulders one after another and said, "You really should lose some weight, fatty." Chen Duo looked pale and did not say a word for a long time. After giving his orders, Yunyang murmured, "I wonder if the people from the Phoenix Cry sect will come. If they do, how long will it take for them to arrive?" After some thought, he began to make arrangements. He expanded the mountain guarding formation around the residence of 9 Supremes and scattered a lot of ethereal amethysts to strengthen the formation's foundation. He also went to the residences of the disciples and buried a few pieces of ethereal amethysts in the large squares. With this round of arrangements, the spiritual chi in the residence of 9 Supremes increased again. With money and resources, of course, one could be willful. Just wait. I hope you guys can come. On the other side, Gan Tianyan was travel-worn. After traveling day and night, she finally stepped into the gate of the Phoenix Cry sect. "Where's the sect leader?" "At the main peak." Before the person who answered could finish, Gan Tianyan was already nowhere to be seen. All that could be seen was a white line flying away from afar. "Sect leader, junior sister, I have something to discuss with you." Chapter 1191. Gan Tianyan's face was filled with impatience. Beads of sweat were dripping down her beautiful face. "What is it? Why are you so anxious?" Ping Jinhua was surprised. How many years had it been since her senior sister was so anxious? "It's like this." Gan Tianyan sat down and snatched the teapot from Ping Jinhua's hands at an extremely fast speed. She put it to her mouth and drank as she said, "This is what happened. Senior sister, you didn't see it, but there are over 10,000 disciples in the entire mountain, and each and every one of them is a genius." Ping Jinhua sat quietly and listened seriously. Her brows were slightly furrowed, and her expression was uncertain. She did not speak for a long time. "This is definitely an extremely rare opportunity for our sect. At least for me, I definitely cannot miss it." After Gan Tianyan finished speaking, she anxiously looked at her sect leader junior sister. "This matter, it's not like we can't do it," Ping Jinhua thought for a moment and said, "but this can only be decided after all the elders of our sect meet. If sect leader Yun doesn't mind, we can bring the higher-ups of our sect to pay a visit and see how many people from the residence of 9 Supremes are willing to cultivate our sect's cultivation method. At the same time, we can also see if we approve of those disciples. After all, there is a limit to how many disciples we can take in." Gan Tianyan was taken aback when she heard this. She paused and blushed. "Junior sister, what do you mean? Don't you believe my eyes? Let me tell you, the disciples of the residence of 9 Supremes are all talented and intelligent. Each of them is 1 in a million. Although they are not as good as the top 10 disciples who participated in the Battle of the Celestial Luck Banner, they are definitely top-notch. This is like a pie falling from the sky. Our sect is worried about the lack of successors, and it is difficult for us to have outstanding disciples to inherit our sect. I know how to arrange this, but this is only your side of the story. It cannot be taken into account." Gan Tianyan said anxiously, "I'm telling the truth. Although it's shocking to say that the residence of 9 Supremes has tens of thousands of talented disciples, I've seen it with my own eyes. How can it be fake?" Ping Jinhua smiled. "Senior martial sister, I'm naturally willing to believe what you said. But you also said that what you said was shocking. You saw it with your own eyes and felt that it could not be faked, but in the eyes of others, it was no different from a fantasy story, the ravings of an idiot. I will only ask senior sister one thing. If another person bluntly said that he had 100 disciples with exceptional aptitude under him and wanted to give them all to the sect, would senior sister believe it? As the saying goes, seeing is believing. Only by letting others see it can this matter be true. Gan Tianyin pondered for a moment before nodding. That's true. If someone else were to keep talking about how many talented disciples they have, I wouldn't believe it either. Moreover, there's another question that we need to consider again and again. Senior sister has just said that all the disciples of the residents of Nine Supremes are extremely loyal to the residents of Nine Supremes. Senior sister has spent a long time but has not recruited any of them. What if no one is willing to follow the Phoenix Cry sect after we've taught them for a few years? Wouldn't it be a waste of effort for the residents of Nine Supremes? We can't ignore this, we can't ignore it. Ping Jinyue looked at Gan Tianyin with a playful smile on her face. Gan Tianyin was not offended. She chuckled and said, I raised this question directly to Yunyang at that time. But what Yunyang said is that the teacher-disciple relationship that has been cultivated for many years cannot change the mind of the person who is cultivating it. It seems that it is a matter for the teacher to reflect on himself, right? The premise of our cooperation is that in the next few years, the residents of Nine Supremes will only provide the relevant resources of clothing, food, housing, and transportation for the disciples, but will never impose any restrictions on the cultivation of the disciples. Will never impose any restrictions. Can it really be so? Ping Jinyue looked thoughtful. She pondered for a moment and said, we still need to discuss it. If it's feasible, we'll leave as soon as possible. As soon as Ping Jinyue's voice died away, she immediately asked solemnly, Senior sister, are you really sure that the residents of Nine Supremes has so many disciples with aptitude close to that of Yun Xiuxin and Bai Yexing? During the Celestial Luck Banner battle, Ping Jinyue had a deep impression of the top 10 disciples of the residents of Nine Supremes. Yes. Gan Tianyin said seriously. Not only are there many of them but they even have more room for growth than them. Many of the disciples are very young, only 6 or 7 years old. You should know what this means. Young age meant strong plasticity, and the age of 6 or 7 years old was the best time for a cultivator to build his or her foundation. So I keep feeling that this is strange and that there's something fishy about it. Usually, when something good falls from the sky, the gains outweigh the losses, and the losses outweigh the gains. Ping Jinyue fell into deep thought again. I don't think there will be any loss. Gan Tianyin smiled and said, Senior sister, think about it carefully. Even if the disciples we cultivate with manpower and time may not be on our side, their cultivation base will still belong to Phoenix Cry sect. This is equivalent to leaving a mark on those disciples, and the friendship between master and disciple is built in the process of teaching and solving doubts. I don't believe that no one will go with us in the end. Just like Luo Luo? Although most of her heart is on Luo Dajiang, there is still some part of her heart on me. As long as I don't go against Luo Dajiang, Luo Luo will definitely stand on my side and think for my sake. Don't you think so, senior sister? Ping Jinyue chuckled and said, Junior sister, why do I hear that you seem to have lost your confidence? You are the mother-in-law. As long as you say it, would Luo Dajiang and Jiang Luo dare to say no? Gan Tianyin was slightly embarrassed and said slowly, Senior sister, I'm talking to you seriously but you're mocking me. It has always been like this since the beginning of time. Even if the residents of Nine Supremes has ulterior motives and other schemes, with their current strength, they are still much weaker than Phoenix Cry sect. Even if there is discord and conflict between us, with the manpower we have in their base, do we have to be afraid that they will turn the sky upside down? Ping Jinyue's eyes lit up and she said, That makes sense. Then this matter? Ping Jinyue quickly made a decision. Summon the higher-ups for a meeting immediately and make a decision as soon as possible. Hearing Ping Jinyue's decision, Gan Tianyin went out impatiently to inform the higher-ups. Ping Jinyue was left alone in the hall. She frowned and murmured, What is Yun Yang's intention in doing this? He could have just rejected it and pushed senior sister out of the door with just a word, but he made such a decision. This is very unexpected. It's also unusual. No sect would do this but Yun Yang did it. As she thought about it, a thought suddenly rose in Ping Jinyue's mind. She murmured, Could Yun Yang be? Impossible. How could a mere resident of Nine Supremes have such a huge appetite? Then she put away her thoughts and smiled. Let me meet this sect leader Yun. Not long after, the meeting of the Phoenix Cry sect's higher-ups began. 24 higher-ups sat together, and most of them expressed doubt about Gan Tianyin's words. 10,000 geniuses. Ah. How is this possible? Even if the residents of 9 Supremes had 10 first-generation disciples in the Battle of the Celestial Luck Banner, and each of them is outstanding, you're saying that there are more than 10,000 geniuses with the same aptitude. This is ridiculous. Senior sister, you must be joking, aren't you? Junior sister, you must be seeing things. Either there's something wrong with your eyes. Anyway, I don't believe it. Hee, maybe junior sister Gan had a dream, but the dream was so wonderful that it extended to this moment. Gan Tianyin blushed. Let's not talk too much. Seeing is believing. Anyway, we are not separated by a few days. Everyone follow me to take a look. Let's see if there is something wrong with my eyes. But there's one thing we have to agree on in advance. This incident is a great opportunity for our sect. If it's not true, then I'm the one who deceived you, and I'll bow and apologize to all of you in front of the whole sect. But if it's true, then I've done a great service to the sect. I don't want any other benefits. I just want all of you to bow and thank me together and say, I shouldn't have doubted Elder Gan's discerning eyes. How about it? Do you dare? Ah. Junior sister, are you angry? Let's do it, let's do it. Let's go and take a look. I'd like to see how rare it is for a sect to have more than 10,000 genius disciples all of a sudden. Ah. Even the East Celestial Palace has so many genius disciples now? Ah. But then again, if it's true, it's nothing for us to bow and thank you in front of everyone. It's indeed a great opportunity for our sect if it's true. Why doesn't it deserve a word of thanks and praise from all of us? Let's go. Let's go together. What you hear is false and what you see is true. Gan Tianyin flew up angrily. Everyone follow me. Follow me. Before her voice died away, she had already turned into a stream of light and sped away. Ping Xinhua shook her head helplessly and said softly, You've really made me angry this time. Let's go, let's all go and take a look. To be honest, I also want to see whether this is true or not, whether it's a great opportunity or a great lie. Then the 24 top experts of the Phoenix Cry sect turned into light and sped away. They sped toward the residence of 9 Supremes like the wind and lightning. At this time, the top 10 disciples of the residence of 9 Supremes, including Yun Xiuxin, had all returned. This time Yun Yang adopted a new method. All the inner sect disciples gathered together, including the 9 peak masters. Then he asked the top 10 disciples to go up one by one and tell them what they had done after they went out, what the situation was, how they dealt with it at that time, and what their psychological state was like at that time. Yun Xiuxin. Without a doubt, the first to appear was the eldest senior sister, Yun Xiuxin. Yun Xiuxin, who should have been used to being watched by so many people and being the center of attention, had her face turn the color of a pig's liver. How could she go up and tell her own experience? Especially his own mental journey, it was simply too embarrassing. Should she lie? Should she cover it up? But, how could she lie at this moment and place? Under the watchful eyes of the crowd and the expectation of the crowd, Yun Xiuxin's feet weighed 1,000 kilograms as she walked slowly up the platform. Her pretty little face was flushed and she did not know where to put her hands. After being urged repeatedly, the eldest senior sister finally spoke hesitantly. I was deceived 9 times, when I went out this time, ha! There was a burst of laughter below. Many people burst out laughing when they heard this, spitting until the heads of their peers in front of them were covered with saliva. But when I was deceived for the 10th time, I finally saw through the trick and exposed the scam. Yun Xiuxin explained anxiously, and after the 10th time, whether it was the 11th or the 12th time, I was never deceived again, not even once. The laughter below was even louder. Just tell me how many times you were deceived in total? Asked Luo Dajiang. 9 times. Yun Xiuxin lowered her head. Another burst of laughter rang out. Tell me in detail every time you've been cheated. Tell me all the details. Luo Dajiang put on the face of an impartial judge. I say it. Yun Yang tried hard to hold back his laughter and said, This is the real martial world experience. Tell me it's a good thing for both you and others. As Yun Xiuxin recounted one embarrassing incident after another, the laughter continued to rise and fall. Yun Xiuxin was so embarrassed that tears were welling up in her eyes, but she did not dare to hide anything. She told all her encounters in an extremely aggrieved manner, and her face was already pale with embarrassment. Although Xiuxin's cultivation base is the best among all the disciples, she is still young after all, and it's inevitable that she will be deceived when she goes out to train alone. This is a lack of life experience, not a serious shortcoming. There's only one thing you need to remember: Xiuxin is the easiest to be deceived at her age, and you are the easiest to be deceived. Yunyang said, "Listen up, all of you. When you travel the martial world, you may have to face the old foxes of the martial world, who are far more difficult than those who set up the trap for Xiuxin. It's not an exaggeration to say that it's easy to deal with rookies like you. What kind of person can live a long life in the martial world? It must be someone who is smooth and slick in all aspects. Only by adapting to the martial world can one have a leisurely life. Those who can't adapt to the martial world will only be eliminated by the martial world." What is elimination? It is to step on the path of death, and there is no turning back. Constantly summing up experiences and integrating them into one's own knowledge is the so-called martial world experience. Yes, everything that Xiuxin encountered when she went out to train this time is ridiculous, but in all fairness, if it were any of you, would anyone have the confidence to say that they could avoid all of them safely? Just because you have laughed doesn't mean that you will be fine. You have to learn from it. Because I don't want you to be eliminated. Do you understand? Yes. Your eldest senior sister has given up her dignity this time and taught you this lesson with her personal experience. This is not a joke, but the most precious personal experience, the most authentic experience. This is not only the martial world experience but also a friendship, a truth. Yunyang said earnestly. All the disciples no longer had a smile on their faces. They bowed together and said, "Yes, we will follow sect leader master's teachings." Then all of them bowed to Yun Xiuxin in unison. "Thank you, eldest senior sister, for setting an example for us." Yun Xiuxin's blush deepened as she covered her eyes in embarrassment. "Oh my, how embarrassing," she said while stomping her feet. Then it was Bai Yexing who Xiaofan. This time the entire process of sharing their experiences with the disciples did not take long. It only took a little more than 2 hours. In spite of this, Yunyang had made it clear that all the disciples were to write down what they had learned based on the experiences of their 10 senior brothers and sisters after they went back to cultivate. No exception was allowed. In the following period of time, Qian Duo, Ping Xiaoyi, and Guanuanyang divided all the disciples who had yet to be accepted into the sect into 28 teams, with 500 people in each team. They were arranged according to their age first, then they cultivated at the wind gap every day, allowing the spiritual wind to water their meridians for 3 consecutive days. As for those disciples whose meridians had reached a certain level, Yunyang and the others combed them with a mystical skill. "Boss, we really have too many genius disciples under us. Each of them is extraordinarily talented," Luo Dajiang exclaimed, looking at the disciples who filled the room. Once there were more than 10,000 people, there was no end to it. This statement had never been fake. Most of these disciples were still in their childhood, at the most suitable time for them to build their foundation. The shock of witnessing it with their own eyes was indescribable and shocking. Luo Dajiang was especially impressed by the current situation. There were at least 3,000 of these little fellows who were more talented than he was when he was the same age. Most of the rest were about the same level as him, and only a few were slightly weaker than him. How could such a situation be possible? Luo Dajiang had been very proud of his talent and timing of entering the Tao in the past. He was one of the best among the Demiurge Flawed 10, but now it seemed that one's luck was really incomparable. Comparisons were odious. "How is Ituo?" The higher-ups were worried about this issue. Yunyang chuckled. "I've been paying attention to Ituo's chi and it's still growing. However, no one is to disturb him during this period of time. What he's doing now is a path that no one has taken before, so we can't afford to be careless. This is something that deserves the most attention in the residence of 9 Supremes right now. Ituo is doing something super important like founding a sect. Why don't we stop calling him Ituo?" Lan Ruojuan made a face and said, "Why not? I think it's better to keep the name fixed. If that fellow really succeeds, then his sword art shall be officially named Ituo Sword." Ituo Sword? What sword was that? Everyone was laughing, but they were all in agreement, quite willing to join forces to make this happen. Everyone chatted and laughed for a while, then went off to practice their martial arts. Qian Duo, on the other hand, continued his great plan to amass wealth. This fellow saw that the items in the sect's storeroom were increasing day by day, and he actually took out a lot of rare items and set up an auction house. At the same time he also set up a bank. These two sides worked together and borrowed each other's strength. It was said that they were very famous and vaguely popular. Although these two projects were not well known yet, the money earned from these two shops was already enough to support the daily expenses of the residents of Nine Supremes. This was commendable. The residents of Nine Supremes had a sizable population now. Just the resources of food, clothing, and accommodation for the cultivators who had entered the Dao was already a considerable expenditure. It was not a trivial matter to be able to maintain the operation. Qian Duo is a talent. Dong Qitian said unhurriedly from behind Yun Yang. With such a major domo in charge of internal affairs, other than his slightly lower cultivation base, everything else is impeccable. He's more than qualified to be the Sacred Heart Palace's general affairs manager. But Duoduo's cultivation base is still too low. With his current cultivation base he's still weaker than many disciples, said Yun Yang. When he comes back I'll have to ask Senior to urge him. Dong Qitian chuckled, his expression strange. This fellow is lazy but he's afraid of death and pain. I know how to train him. Yin Yang laughed. Time flew and another 3 days had passed. On this day the sky suddenly changed and the weather was unusual. It was the arrival of the Phoenix Cry sect's upper echelons, causing the weather to change. When the Phoenix Cry sect's upper echelons arrived outside the residence of Nine Supremes Mountain Gate, the 24 of them could already feel a sense of awe before they even entered the residence. Was this the newly upgraded residence of Nine Supremes? How could it occupy such a large area? Did the residents of Nine Supremes want to be the Palace of Nine Supremes from the very beginning? Just by looking at it, one could tell that the residents of Nine Supremes occupied an extraordinarily vast area. Actually, the initial expansion of the residents of Nine Supremes was an unintentional move. Yun Yang did not understand the market at all and wanted to settle the matter in one go. Usually, when a martial artist wanted to establish a sect, it would be more than enough to build a boundary of 30 to 40 miles. After all, the larger the sect's base, the more facilities needed to be built inside, and the larger the external formation of the mountain gate would be. Blindly seeking to be big would only consume a lot of unnecessary resources, and the loss would outweigh the gain. However, Yun Yang did not understand these things at all. Moreover, he possessed resources far beyond the imagination of ordinary people. Mountains and seas of ethereal amethysts. Therefore, from the beginning, he had chosen to occupy the 9 peaks directly and set up the residence of Nine Supremes Foundation formation in a large area with a high density. Then he used the Celestial Luck Banner to further change the terrain, making the already unusually vast mountain gate even more expansive. When Chen Duo realized it, it was already too late. If not, he would not have gone back to save the children without a care. The place was too big and desolate with fewer people. In the beginning he didn't do it on purpose. Up to the astonishing scale today, everything was just a lucky stroke of luck. Unfortunately, no matter if it was at this moment or in the endless years to come, no one would believe it no matter who told them that this was an accident and that it was a mistake. Everyone said that the founding forefather of the residents of Nine Supremes was far-sighted and ambitious, and that his vision was naturally beyond the reach of ordinary people. The Phoenix Cry sect has come to visit the mountain. Please inform them. Gan Tianyin stepped forward to report. He thought that he would have to wait for a while. After all, the Phoenix Cry sect had come out in full force this time, so the residents of Nine Supremes had to be more vigilant. Unexpectedly, the mountain gate of the residents of Nine Supremes opened with a bang. As the mountain gate opened, a thick white mist of spiritual chi rushed out with a whoosh. Even though the people from the Phoenix Cry sect were all experienced and knowledgeable seniors, they all took a deep breath at the same time. What a pure spiritual chi. How comfortable. The bell rang. It rang 49 times. It was the bell to welcome the distinguished guests. Any sect with a bit of wealth in the bound of universe would do the same. Accompanying the welcoming bell was Yun Yang's hearty laughter that came from afar. It was indescribably adorable. The residence of Nine Supremes is honored by the arrival of sect leader Ping and other seniors. The group had already walked into the mountain gate. Along the way there were exotic flowers and grasses, tall buildings and fragrant scents. Honored by the presence? May I ask which part of it is fluffy? This is no longer modesty. You're actually showing off, aren't you? It was early in the morning, the time for the disciples of the residents of Nine Supremes to practice. Under the lead of a tall youth, a group of disciples ran out of the lodging while shouting their chants. The entire group lined up neatly and ran at a uniform speed towards the field. 500 people? They were all experienced martial artists. An elder could tell the exact number of people at a glance and could not help but widen his eyes. These 500 disciples are not bad, not bad, not bad at all? The elders and hall masters of the Phoenix Cry sect only took a glance at them for a moment before they were all stunned. In terms of talent, these 500 disciples had completely surpassed all the current disciples of the Phoenix Cry sect. So many? How could there be so many talented disciples? At this moment even the sect leader, Ping Zhanyue, was a little stunned. Her eyes did not blink and could not move. It's true, it's actually true. What Senior Sister Gan said is all true. Oh my God. Chapter 1192. Before coming here, she had reminded herself repeatedly that what Junior Sister Gan had said might be true. She had to stay calm when the time came. She had to stay calm. She was the leader of Phoenix Cry sect. She had to stay calm and not lose her identity. However, Ping Zhanyue could not help but gulp now. As far as the eye could see, those pink and tender little faces were serious and adorable. Every single one of them was a person with excellent innate talent and excellent aptitude. Looking at their running postures, a few of these little fellows were born with the reverse genitals? The so-called inverse pallus bone referred to the elbow joint that could be bent at the same angle. An ordinary person's arm could only be bent forward. Pulling it backward would cause unbearable pain, and if too much force was exerted, it would break and cause serious injury. Those who had the inverse pallus bone could bend their arms backward and close to their shoulders. The flexibility of their arms was far beyond ordinary people. This was only the most common ability of those who had the inverse pallus bone. Those who had the inverse pallus bone must also have the unparalleled blade, which meant that they had an extra ligament on both sides of their arms. It was equivalent to doubling their strength. This was how they were born. These people were all natural martial arts prodigies, rare even among millions of people. But here, with just a glance, there were actually quite a few people with this kind of talent. Moreover, they were not the most outstanding among the 500 children. The 24 Phoenix Cry sect's higher-ups were all stunned. One of them mumbled in a low voice, "Maybe the residents of 9 Supremes did it on purpose, gathering all the talented disciples into a team like this." No one responded to the strange voice. So what if there was only one team? There were 500 of them. 500 seedlings with extremely high aptitudes and talents. Such a number of people was something that other sects could hardly gather in the entire bound of universe. As they walked a few more steps forward, they heard more teams running towards them from the side. There were a few teams on the left and right, all of them walking in unison. Yun Yang led the way in front, leading the group forward. Excited by the prospect of hunting, the group stopped at the fork in the road and watched the 3 teams running towards them with interest, refusing to move a single inch. At this time, one of the teams ran past the crowd and bowed to Yun Yang in unison. "Greetings, sect leader master." Then he ran over without stopping, not stopping at all. Then there was another group and then another. Including the first group, there were already 4 groups, a total of 2,000 people. At this time, the eyes of the 24 senior members of the Phoenix Cry sect, without exception, were all red with envy or jealousy. Genius. All of them were geniuses. Mother ***. Heavens! If there are 2 who can inherit my mantle, I can die without regrets. Look, all of them are so well behaved, so good looking, so well mannered, so sensible. There were 2,000 of them. Then, in the distance, more and more people were shouting and running over. 24 people, each of their feet seemed to be nailed to the road. Their eyes were fixed on the disciples who were running towards them, or turned around to look at the disciples who had already run far away. Another 500 people. 500 people. They were all neatly arranged in a square formation. In the end, everyone was already numb to it. They all felt as if they were in a dream. There were a total of 28 teams and each team had 500 people. How many were 28 teams? I can't quite count it, my head is a little dizzy. It should be about 14,000 people. 14,000, oh my God. How did the residents of 9 Supremes find these children? Moreover, after the 28 teams, there was actually a team with the smallest number of people running past them. There were only 125 people in this team. It was only a quarter of the previous teams. But these 125 were obviously more talented. Oh my God, Ping Zhanyue felt her palms heat up. She turned her head abruptly and looked at Gan Tianyan. She said firmly, "Senior sister, we can totally cooperate with the residents of 9 Supremes on this matter." A long-bearded male elder of the Phoenix Cry sect stared blankly and murmured almost unconsciously, "It's true, it's true. A few of these children actually have golden skin and jade bones, more than 20 innate bodies. There's also the mysticaline body, the purine body, the reverse palace bone, the immaculate body. I can't believe they have the immaculate body. I'm not dreaming, am I? He turned his head and looked at Ping Jinyue, his beard trembling. Sect leader, there are 24 of us. Why don't we each teach a team? It's a little hard, but it's worth it. Although Ping Jinyue was excited, she was shocked back to reality by the elder's words. Each person a team? Do you have such a big appetite? Her first reaction was that even she, as the sect leader, did not have such a big hope, but this elder of hers actually wanted to take all of them in one go? He was really daring. But why didn't he do it? According to the original plan, the Phoenix Cry sect would cooperate with the residents of Nine Supremes, providing teachers, techniques, and resources to train the many disciples in front of them. The future was undoubtedly promising. After a few years, when these disciples had achieved something, they would be grateful to their masters and provide resources to the Phoenix Cry sect. With the experience of the Phoenix Cry sect's elders, they should be able to gain something from this. However, this was still not as good as taking all the 14,000 disciples in front of them, was it not? Now that the strongest force of the Phoenix Cry sect had come to the hinterland of the residents of Nine Supremes, the protection of the mountain gate could no longer be used. The residents of Nine Supremes could only deal with the strongest force of the Phoenix Cry sect with their own combat strength. With the Phoenix Cry sect's understanding of the combat strength of both sides, it was really not difficult to destroy the residents of Nine Supremes' upper echelons. Yun Yang and the others had improved since the Battle of the Celestial Luck Banner, but they were at most at the level of the Phoenix Cry sect's Qi Lai. It was not difficult to destroy them. Almost all the Phoenix Cry sect's upper echelons had the same thought. In the bound of universe, where the strongest fist was the most powerful, the residents of Nine Supremes, which had excellent resources and so many talented disciples, was like a child making a fool of himself. What was more, this child did not have an adult backing him up. With such a shortcut in front of them, several elders were already thinking about it and letting their imaginations run wild. Before Ping Jinyue, the sect leader, could do anything, Gan Tianyan curled her lips and said, "Forget it, all of you. Let me tell you the truth, even if you kill all the upper echelons of the residents of Nine Supremes now, you can't really win the hearts of these children." She sighed and said, "There are geniuses everywhere here and I'm not blind. How can I turn a blind eye to them? I've tried to recruit them a long time ago, okay? It's a pity that these little fellows have been seriously brainwashed by the residents of Nine Supremes. They're all loyal. The upper echelons of the residents of Nine Supremes are very confident about this. They've asked me to recruit as many as I can, but I've been busy for more than a month, and I haven't recruited a single one. To put it more bluntly, if we really have any conflict with the upper echelons of the residents of Nine Supremes here, these little fellows will most likely hate us for the rest of their lives. You must be dreaming if you want to take them in as disciples. No, if we're really targeted by these little fellows, we might have to guard against their revenge for the rest of our lives. Qi Lai is a good example. I'll say this first, don't blame me for not warning you." When the other elders heard this, their faces immediately became gloomy. It was true. Just by looking at the groups of disciples coming over and the way each child looked at Yun Yang as they bowed, one could tell that it was admiration from the bottom of their hearts, gratitude and admiration that came from the bottom of their hearts. They were even fanatical. Therefore, this shortcut was obviously not a real shortcut. It was basically a dead end and it could not be taken. It would also completely ruin Phoenix Cry sect's reputation. However, as they denied the shortcut, a new problem arose. If these children were only grateful to Yun Yang and the other upper echelons, then it would be fine. It could be reversed in a few years, but this worship and admiration wasn't something that could be easily erased. It would be even more difficult to deal with that fanaticism. Especially if they really did something wrong and said that they would hate them for the rest of their lives, it was obviously true and not false at all. Then, how many chances would they have in the cooperation plan? How many disciples would they be able to gain in the end? This question was not only realistic, but it was also sharp and could not be avoided. No matter how talented the disciples in front of them were, if they could not be taken in for their own use, they would still be working for others, and it would not be in their own interest. Yun Yang's faint chuckle rang out. "Sect leader Ping, these disciples of mine are not bad, are they?" "They're not only not bad." Ping Jinyue swallowed and said, "Sect leader Yun, junior sister Gan has mentioned how our two sects should cooperate before, but this is a serious matter after all. I hope that both sides can enter the discussion agenda as soon as possible." If what she saw was true, The little girl just now had the spirit phoenix physique that was the most compatible with her sex's highest cultivation method, ninth heaven phoenix cry divine art. This discovery made Ping Jinyue's eyes widen. She had to take this little girl in no matter what. I'm afraid this matter can't be resolved in a short time. Yun Yang said elegantly, everyone please come in and have some tea. Let's talk while we drink. The upper echelons of both sides are here. The opportunity for both sides to cooperate has been established, and their sincerity has been demonstrated. What follows is just a minor detail. Yun Yang ignored the slightly malicious gazes of the Phoenix Cry sect's upper echelons. With Dong Qiqin here, if the Phoenix Cry sect dared to have any evil thoughts, they would probably be annihilated here. The 24 upper echelons of the Phoenix Cry sect were so anxious that their mouths were blistered, but they still nodded. All right. They followed Yun Yang into the main hall of the central peak. Sigh, I'm like a fish on the chopping block now, but I can't turn the tables and confront them with force. How can I not give in? Luo Dajiang and the others were waiting at the door, greeting them in unison. It could not be helped. Because of Jiang Luo, all the upper echelons of the residents of Nine Supremes were collectively one generation lower, so they all treated the people of the Phoenix Cry sect as a senior. Ping Jinyue led her disciples to return the greeting. Although the residents of Nine Supremes was very respectful and considered themselves juniors, it was only because they had given them face. The residents of Nine Supremes was now a true middle-class celestial luck banner sect, and it was also the initiator and key person of this cooperation. How could they allow themselves to be careless? Both sides looked amiable and elegant. Led by Ping Jinyue, the people of the Phoenix Cry sect all stared at Luo Dajiang and the other 8 men standing at the door. They could see that each of them was tall and straight and had a dignified appearance, and judging from their cultivation base, they had improved by at least 1 tier compared to when they were in the Celestial Luck Banner competition. Except for a few people, the rest of the Phoenix Cry sect's upper echelons had all attended the previous Celestial Luck Banner contest, so they thought they knew the combat strength of the upper echelons of the residents of Nine Supremes very well. But now, it was obviously very different from what they had expected. There were a total of 9 of the Demiurge flawed 10, and only Shi Wuchen was missing. Among the 9, 6 of them were at the peak of the 3rd grade Saint King realm, while the remaining 3 were not just slightly weaker, but stronger, having already reached the 4th grade Saint King realm. Among them, Luo Dajiang, who had the highest cultivation, had already reached the peak of the 4th grade Saint King realm. This kind of cultivation speed was unbelievable and unbelievable. Ping Jinyue sighed inwardly. Geniuses like these have been used as whetstones by the various sects for a long time in the past. They've always been silent and not stirred up any waves. Now they've not only amazed the world with a single brilliant feat, but they've also soared into the sky and reached the peak. I really don't know what those people would think now that they know about their progress. If all the genius whetstones in this world are like this, I'm afraid everyone will fight to be a whetstone. Luo, on the other hand, has a good eye and a good fate. She fell in love with Luo Dajiang at first sight. In the past, I and junior sister Gan were the ones who tried to stop them, almost breaking up this great marriage. Now that we're working together, this so-called cooperation is actually our sect coveting the disciples of the residents of Nine Supremes, and we're here to poach them. Everything is just an excuse. Thinking of this, Ping Jinyue could not help feeling embarrassed and did not know what to say. Please. After entering the main hall, everyone took their seats. Yun Yang did not sit on his high and mighty sect leader's chair, but chose to sit opposite the square table with everyone else. There was a long square table in the main hall of the residence of Nine Supremes, which was usually used by the higher-ups to discuss matters. It did not look crowded even if a dozen or 20 people sat there, but the number of people seated at this time was a little over the limit. On one side of the table were Yun Yang, Luo Dajiang, and the other 8 people. Yun Yang sat in the middle so he did not look crowded. On the other side were the 24 people from the Phoenix Cry sect. There were too many people, so it inevitably looked a little crowded. But no one cared about these details now. All of them were deep in thought, thinking about how they should speak later and how they could get the most out of it. At this point, the cooperation between the two sides had already been decided, and there was no need to doubt it. The next question was how to get more benefits from the cooperation. At this time, Yun Xiaoxin and the others acted as tea boys and came in to serve tea. When the aroma of tea filled the air, everyone's thoughts came to an end, and they all looked up with expectant faces. Yun Yang stared at Ping Jinyue with a warm smile on his handsome face and said, "Sect leader Ping, on behalf of the residents of Nine Supremes, I welcome all the seniors." As soon as Yunyang said that, the 10 people on the other side bowed their heads to show their respect. The people from the Phoenix Cry sect, led by Ping Jinyue, bowed slightly to show that they did not dare to accept the greeting from the residents of Nine Supremes. Then Ping Jinyue said, "Sect leader Yun, you're too polite. Senior Gan has consulted me about the lack of teachers in our sect, which has inevitably delayed the progress of many disciples' cultivation base. So, I propose to senior the cooperation between our two sects at the right time," Yunyang said slowly. "All the seniors are magnanimous, especially when it comes to the matter of Luoluo and Dajiang. You are magnanimous, compassionate, and full of the demeanor of an elder. I've long admired you, and I feel even more cordial and reliable for Senior Gan to point out the shortcomings of our sect without hesitation." At this point he showed an even brighter smile and said, "So, we have no objection to the cooperation with your sect, and we even have some expectations. After all, almost all of our disciples are talented cultivators with excellent aptitudes, and we don't want to delay any of them because of our selfishness. Since the seniors are willing to help, we are naturally happy to see it happen." Ping Jinyue smiled and said, "Sect leader Yun is still too polite. In fact, our sect also values this cooperation very much. Since it's a cooperation, we will naturally take what we need. Not only is there no help, but there is also no help at all. In this cooperation, the Phoenix Cry sect will not only benefit from it, but the benefits will also be considerable. It's true that we're taking advantage of the residents of Nine Supremes." Very sensitively, Ping Jinyue brushed away Yunyang's mention of help, and made it clear, putting the Phoenix Cry sect's position in an unusually obvious light. After listening to the sect leader's words, the other 23 people from the Phoenix Cry sect all had a slightly strange expression on their faces, but they immediately turned calm. The sect leader's words were straight to the point, setting the relationship between both parties on the basis of cooperation. It was a direct and targeted speech. "Help. Who said that we're going to help you? If we acknowledged it from the beginning and if it really became a help, wouldn't it be a huge loss? We're here for the benefits. If there's no equivalent benefit in the end, only a fool would come." Yunyang laughed and said, "Seniors, you may not know this, but these children have unique backgrounds and each of their lives is very tragic. I've always treated each of them as my own, and I look forward to them even more than ordinary elders. I hope that they'll be successful in their careers and have a promising future. No matter which sect they eventually become in the future, it's all good. However, for now, the arrival of seniors and the rest of you, to me, is to help. Therefore this word of thanks is still necessary. This is the gratitude of the parents of these disciples, and it has nothing to do with anything else." Yunyang smiled and said, "However, sect leader Ping's straightforward cooperation is also the crux of our summit this time, even though this cooperation is considered a foregone conclusion. Although this cooperation is considered a foregone conclusion, this cooperation still requires both parties to show corresponding sincerity. Sect leader Ping, don't you think so?" Ping Jinyue said, "Of course." Yunyang chuckled and suddenly changed the topic. "Now that sect leader Ping has personally come to the residence of Nine Supremes, although it's only a glimpse, you've at least seen the environment here. Forgive me for asking, but how is the cultivation environment of the residence of Nine Supremes compared to that of the Phoenix Cry sect?" Ping Jinyue's expression turned awkward, but she still said directly, "The residence of Nine Supremes is beautiful, and the spiritual chi here is so rich that it's the first time I've seen it in my life. Whether it's the scale, the purity of the spiritual chi, or the range of the atmosphere, it's better than that of the Phoenix Cry sect. If I hadn't seen it with my own eyes, I wouldn't have believed it." This knowledge naturally made the people of the Phoenix Cry sect feel ashamed, but no one said anything. There was nothing to say. Ever since they came in, they had long realized that the spiritual chi atmosphere of the residence of Nine Supremes was much stronger than that of the Phoenix Cry sect. The difference in spiritual chi was at least 3 times more than that of the Phoenix Cry sect. This was an unbelievable fact, but it was an undeniable fact. Denying this fact would only make one look even more ungentlemanly, and it was meaningless. Therefore, regarding the location of the training of the disciples, since the beginning of our cooperation, the entire process will be carried out in the residence of Nine Supremes territory. I believe there's no room for discussion about this, is there?" He smiled faintly and said, "The initial starting point of our cooperation is for the future of the disciples, so that they can better come into contact with the martial arts. Sect leader Ping, do you have any objections?" As soon as Yunyang said this, everyone in Phoenix Cry sect was stunned. Phoenix Cry sect did not want to waste the time of so many talented disciples in poaching the disciples of the residents of Nine Supremes, but Yun Yang was using his own words to attack them. He was also talking about the progress of the disciples' cultivation. Although Ping Jinyue wanted to bring the disciples back to teach them, she was a person of great status after all, and she could not say anything that would betray her conscience. Yin Yang was right. If they continued to cultivate in the residence of Nine Supremes, the progress would be at least 3 times faster than if they cultivated in the Phoenix Cry sect. This was undoubtedly very beneficial to the growth of the disciples. That's right, let's set the location of the training of the disciples in the residence of Nine Supremes. Ping Jianyue exchanged glances with the others and saw the affirmation in their eyes. After some thought, she finally nodded in agreement. Yun Yang was immediately relieved of the burden in his heart. According to Yun Yang's plan, the most important thing was none other than the location. It could almost be said that as long as the location of the training could be confirmed in the residence of Nine Supremes, the entire plan would be a success. The rest of the follow-up was actually not important. However, Yun Yang still needed to continue the discussion now. Since the training location has been confirmed in the residence of Nine Supremes, all the resources related to the cultivation, such as the consumed mystical crystals and spiritual materials, as well as clothing, food, accommodation, and so on, will naturally be provided by the residents of Nine Supremes. I've promised Senior Gon about this before and it's still valid now. Sect leader Ping shouldn't have any objections to this, right? Yun Yang chuckled and said leisurely. Absolutely not. There's no such logic. Ping Jianyue objected immediately without thinking. Not only Ping Jianyue, but the other 23 people also shook their heads in unison, their refusal obvious. What kind of joke was this? If they followed Yun Yang's plan, the Phoenix Cry sect would naturally have a great advantage in terms of the consumption of financial and material resources. The food, drink, accommodation and cultivation resources would all be provided by the residents of Nine Supremes, and they did not need to pay a single cent more. It seemed like they had gained a great advantage, but in fact, it was not the case at all. The main purpose of the cooperation between the residents of Nine Supremes and the Phoenix Cry sect this time had never been about resources, but the disciples. The final focus was on the future belonging of the disciples who had a successful cultivation base. Gan Tianyin had already made it clear that the target disciples had all been brainwashed by the residents of Nine Supremes' upper echelons and had a strong sense of belonging. Now that all the resources were provided by the residents of Nine Supremes, would there still be disciples who would follow them in the future? The upper echelons of the Phoenix Cry sect had even reached a consensus that they would use a large number of resources to win the favor of the target disciples. Now that the residents of Nine Supremes had promised to provide all the resources, was it not to kill the chance of them wanting to show kindness to the disciples? How were they going to win the hearts of these little fellows? Ping Jianyue and the others had even begun to imagine that if they really followed Yun Yang's plan, in the eyes of these little fellows, they would just be making a living in the residence of Nine Supremes. Would they want to take the target with them in the future? What kind of nonsense was that? Therefore, on this point, the 24 people of the Phoenix Cry sect obviously had the same idea. Whether the selected disciples will follow us in the future or not, even if they collectively choose to stay in the residence of Nine Supremes in the end, all the resources they need in the process of cultivation must be provided by us. The resources we provide will only be more than those provided to the true disciples of the Phoenix Cry sect. Ping Jianyue's words were very clear and she was very generous. The treatment of the true disciples of the Phoenix Cry sect was undoubtedly first class. Jiang Luoluo was the leader of the female true disciples of the Phoenix Cry sect, and the treatment she enjoyed was unusually high. To put it bluntly, if Luo Dajiang did not have the opportunity of the residence of Nine Supremes, he could not even afford to support his own wife with his personal savings. Yun Yang frowned and said hesitantly, "A man's words are trustworthy, and a man's words are trustworthy. I have solemnly promised Senior Gon that you only need to provide the teachers. Besides, we are a family, so there is no need to fuss over these details." Ping Jianyue interrupted him and said, "This is not a matter of whether we are a family or not, but a matter of our own responsibilities. We treat the selected disciples as true disciples, so he is a true disciple of the Phoenix Cry sect. No matter what he chooses in the end, at least in our hearts, he is already a disciple of our sect. How can we ask for the things that our disciples need for cultivation?" She spoke righteously, but she was cursing inwardly. Who is a family with you? We are here to poach him, and the cultivation resources are a wonderful way for us to show our strength and win people's hearts. How can we miss this opportunity? Yun Yang frowned again and said, "Doesn't this make the residents of Nine Supremes look petty?" Sect leader Yun, you are wrong. Our original intention of coming here is to not let the outstanding disciples go to waste. Not only do we have to bear the cultivation needs of the selected disciples, but we also don't need the residents of Nine Supremes to provide for our own food and clothing. Ping Zhanyue smiled sweetly and said, "Even blood brothers have to settle accounts clearly, not to mention that we are two middle-class celestial luck banner sections." Yun Yang thought for a moment and said reluctantly, "In that case we will do as sect leader Ping says, but there is no need to be so clear about this matter. It is too cliché to be calculative. At least for the next period of time, let the residents of Nine Supremes be the host." Ping Zhanyue smiled and said, "The cooperation with the residents of Nine Supremes this time is already an unexpected opportunity for our sect. If we encroach on it again, it will be as bad as not doing enough. We have brought all the expenses with us, so there is no need for sect leader Yun to worry." Be the host? No need. He couldn't take advantage of her at all. This was related to the major problem of recruiting. At this moment, the other 23 people of the Phoenix Cry sect were full of admiration for their sect leader's judgment and actions. Those who were not very quick-witted immediately understood after being explained by their peers through telepathy. The sect leader was indeed the sect leader. He had judgment and decisiveness, and the results were immediate. If it were them, they would have fallen into the sect leader Yun's trap with just a few words. This pretty boy's every word was a trap. As long as this fellow paid for a day's expenses, the Phoenix Cry sect might become a poor sect under the deliberate exaggeration of the residents of Nine Supremes. Yun Yang was helpless as he chuckled and said, "Sect leader Ping, you're truly the leader of a sect. This is too." The faces of the 23 people of the Phoenix Cry sect all revealed proud expressions, each of them full of arrogance. You want to fight with our sect leader with this little trick of yours? Next, it's about the details of the accommodation. Yun Yang pointed casually and said, "I'm going to mark out a separate area over there. It may not be very big, about 100 acres in circumference, for the seniors and chosen disciples of the Phoenix Cry sect." "I wonder if this is enough for you, sect leader Ping?" That's enough. Ping Zhanyue agreed without hesitation. What a joke. The Phoenix Cry sect, including the entire mountain, is only about 1,000 acres of land. In fact, the place used for cultivation is only about 200 acres. Now, we're giving 100 acres here? It's too spacious. Do you want us to move a small part of the Phoenix Cry sect to the residents of Nine Supremes? The houses have been built over there with individual courtyards. You can choose the house you like, Yin Yang said. All right. As for the expenses of the houses over there, including the construction costs, we'll rent them all. I'll settle the bill with sect leader Yun later. Ping Zhanyue had made up her mind. Nothing needed to be free. She had already spent a lot of money, so why should she care about the little money of renting a house? The other disciples nodded secretly at Ping Zhanyue's decision. I'll buy everything with money, and I won't take advantage of the residents of Nine Supremes at all. From this aspect, it shows that the Phoenix Cry sect is rich. All right. Yun Yang said, "Next, it's about the number of disciples to be trained and trained. There are a total of 14,300 disciples and residents of Nine Supremes. Xiuxin and the others are our inner disciples, so they are inconvenient to be selected by you. Seniors, I don't think you have any objection to this, do you?" Ping Zhanyue looked incredulous and asked in surprise, "What do you mean, sect leader Yun?" Gan Tianyin had said that it was their turn to choose disciples after the residents of Nine Supremes selected the inner sect disciples. Although Ping Zhanyue felt helpless about this, she could do nothing about it because it was the right thing to do. If it were her, she would do the same. But now Yun Yang's words, it seemed that there was another change, and this change was the situation that she wanted to see the most. Yun Yang smiled faintly and said, "The basis of our cooperation is to show enough goodwill. My words are simple and clear. Except for Xiuxin and the other 60 to 70 people, you can choose the other disciples at will." As soon as this was said, the people of the Phoenix Cry sect were overjoyed and could not hide it. "Isn't this giving us priority in choosing target disciples? This is great. Sect leader Yun, the sincerity that you have shown is really... We are a little embarrassed." Ping Zhanyue said politely and then said, "But since sect leader Yun has said so, if we continue to refuse, it will seem that we are not close enough. We will accept your sincerity and accept it." 23 Phoenix Cry sect's higher-ups tried their best to keep a straight face, but they were laughing in their hearts. He was indeed the sect leader. When it was time to refuse, he did not hesitate, but when it was time to take advantage of them, he did not even hesitate. He even said it firmly. They had to take advantage of him. They could not be courteous at this moment. If they were courteous and Yun Yang took advantage of the situation, they would not be able to cry even if they wanted to. Yun Yang smiled warmly and said, "Senior is the one who is courteous. This is how it should be, how it should be." Was too smooth. Everyone in the Phoenix Cry sect felt the same way. They even had a subtle feeling that everything was in the palm of their hands. Next, it's about the candidates and the number of people. Yun Yang laughed and said, "Sect leader Ping, may I ask how many people from your sect have come here to be disciples?" Hearing Yun Yang's words, Ping Zhanyue hesitated for the first time. She slowly turned to look at her peers. However, he saw that his fellow disciples were all looking forward to it, and some even couldn't wait. Ping Zhanyue paused and said in a low voice, "Who are you?" Before he could finish speaking, he heard 23 people say in unison, "I'll stay." At this moment, no one had the slightest bit of hesitation. They spoke in unison without any cooperation. Cough cough. Yun Yang could not help but laugh out loud in excitement. He quickly coughed twice to cover it up. Things seemed to be going too smoothly. Yun Yang could not help but have a subtle feeling that everything was in the palm of his hands. It was a feeling that everything was in the palm of his hands. The question was whose feeling was real and whose was not? You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.